The ranking of Naruto games.
43 Naruto games. That is how many I have spent countless hours playing and ranking over the course of more than 2 years. And I'd love to say I completed all of them, but 2 of those games actually managed to defeat me. Rewatching the ranking of Naruto games feels like a time capsule, each episode taking place in a very different time in my life. I went through different haircuts, different studio configurations, different microphones. But at the end of the day, we did it. We ranked every single one of those games. It's a series I'm very proud of, but it feels like people are finding random scattered episodes of the series. And so I wanted to have all of the episodes together in this single video. So please, enjoy the journey that is the ranking of Naruto games. We're starting with the first Clash of Ninja game on GameCube and the first Ultimate Ninja game on PlayStation 2. These were the first Naruto games to come out here in the West. They released only 3 months apart from each other, and before these games came to the West, Naruto was a Japan-only thing, and a lot of those Japanese games never came over to the West. They were never translated, and those will not be in the ranking of Naruto games. I cannot fairly judge a game I cannot understand. You want me to play a 20-hour RPG where I can't even read the text? Not happening. And hey, if you guys want more episodes of this, make sure to click that like button and leave a comment on which game you want me to tackle next. I have no idea if this show will work on this channel, so if you want to see more episodes, make sure to click the like, leave a comment, let's help this video do well, and let's jump into Clash of Ninja. When I got my hands on Clash of Ninja last week, I was so impressed at how well it holds up as a fighting game. Controls are simple, which falls perfectly in line with what a lot of fighting games are trying to do nowadays. And at the same time, I could feel there was something to it, some depth waiting to be discovered. You mash a button, a combo comes out, and you discover that your directional buttons change the combo that you're mashing. Some throw your opponent across the stage, others are launchers. And it seemed like you could juggle opponents for some really devastating combos, and turns out, yeah, you totally can juggle in this game. And these combos can even be situational depending on how close you are to the corner. This game has depth, and I could totally see myself hosting a Naruto Clash of Ninja tournament in this year of 2020. That's how much fun I had playing this game. Because on top of the base mechanics, the different characters actually feel relatively unique. I mean, everyone can mash out a combo, they're all very easy to pick up, but the combo roots have different properties. Everyone has different jutsu, everyone has different jabbing and even movement speeds. Zabuza, for instance, he hits like a truck, but he is super slow, so you need to play him as sort of a counter-attack character. Naruto is a good, well-rounded character with great juggling combos and a move that just teleports you to your opponent. And Sasuke is completely useless. However, you could argue that Clash of Ninja is more of a fighting game with Naruto characters than a good adaptation of the Naruto series. You can see many elements of Naruto in this game. You can use your meter for substitution jutsu, taking you out of a combo. You can also see some of your favorite jutsu, but this isn't really how Naruto characters fight in the show. They're not strafing left and right, they're not playing footsies. In the show, they're jumping around, running up trees, throwing shuriken and jutsu, and taking breaks to tell their deep and sad backstories. Though at the same time, with the success of Dragon Ball FighterZ, there has been a shift in the community. I mean, Dragon Ball characters don't fight on the ground for most of the time, and you can't freely fly or even transform in FighterZ. You have a super dash button and your combos can stay in the air for a really long time, but unless you're Zamasu, you can't really control your flight, and unless you're Frieza, you can't even transform. And even then, it's only for a short period of time. Has that made Dragon Ball FighterZ a bad game? No. Even though it's a fighting game first and a Dragon Ball game second, it is still one of the best Dragon Ball games of all time. In my opinion, the best Dragon Ball game of all time. But back in 2006, the mindset was different, and this simply didn't feel like Naruto. Nowadays though, I'd love to see a new version of this. Why are we remastering the Storm series? Bring me a Clash of Ninja collection. Alright, Takara Tomy lost the Naruto battle. Bandai Namco has the license now. Well, to be fair, this first Clash of Ninja game wasn't without its flaws. I mean, first of all, if you have a full meter, you can throw your ultimate attack, and this is completely unblockable. You can try and dodge it, but that doesn't always work, and you simply couldn't block. Half of your health bar is gone, just like that, from an unblockable attack. Is this the new Guilty Gear? You also had some weird interactions with hitboxes and hurtboxes feeling very wonky. Sidestepping attacks only works sometimes. Opponents can hit you even though you're behind them. And then when you're Rock Lee, all of these problems are multiplied because this character is broken as f. You used half of your meter to sub out of a combo, guess what? Rock Lee doesn't care. You thought your block string was safe? Welcome to the fastest jab in the game. Half screen corner carries with juggling opportunities every single combo? Yeah, this character would be banned from any tournament. But that's just it. All the problems that this game has with the fighting system could be fixed nowadays with a balance patch. Fix hitboxes, change frame data, change some characters slightly. They are balance changes because the game, the base game, is actually very solid. There was, however, a bigger problem that is simply simple balance patch can fix, and that's content. This game's biggest problem is that there wasn't enough of it. If you're playing multiplayer with a friend, you can get some mileage out of it, but even then, the roster is super small with only 8 characters, and one of them is banned. There's an arcade mode where you fight against the entire roster. First of all, it's a fighting game. Fighting against the CPU is never that much fun, but okay. Once you defeat the entire roster, you unlock a character bio and you can zoom in on the character model. Hooray! And story mode is super short. It goes from the moment Naruto graduates to Genin until after the Zabuza arc, where you meet Rock Lee right before the Chunin exam and you fight him, and the story ends with this amazing piece of music. It's like I'm watching an AMV from the 90s. They changed some events in this story mode because you play the whole thing as Naruto, which if you ask me is a wasted opportunity to make you try out the rest of the cast. But since you play as Naruto and you have to win some fights in this very limited segment of the story, you have Sasuke, for instance, wanting to fight Naruto right before the Kakashi exam. And Sasuke actually loses that fight. It's wild. And the whole thing is actually voice acted, though the voice acting kind of sounds like this.
I shall be 100% Shinobi.
You are Naruto Uzumaki.
Mwah! Top tier voice acting, I know. I mean, this game actually has custom intros for specific character matchups, but since Rock Lee's appearance is so small in this game, his whole personality is that he wants to fight Sasuke. But then, when he finally fights against Sasuke, this is all he has to say.
Please.
This game's roster is already too small, but Rock Lee's addition was a mistake. If you play this game for like an hour, you'll get everything you can out of it. Except, if you have a friend, you can get a bit more since the basics are really solid. Then again, the small roster also takes away from its longevity. That said, I can't wait to see where the series goes from here, and with all of that, we're gonna rank this game a D. Mostly because it needed more content. But since it was the first game we ranked, it is now the best Naruto game of all time, and also the worst Naruto game of all time. Let's see how Ultimate Ninja compares to it
In the ranking of Naruto games.
Previously, in the ranking of Naruto games, Clash of Ninja was a solid fighting game. And we literally just talked about this. Let's move on to Ultimate Ninja. 3 months later, Ultimate Ninja comes out in the US, and my god, this is one of my most played series from back when I was a kid. Not the first Ultimate Ninja specifically, I spent a lot of time with 3 and 4, I think, but I have a lot of nostalgia for this series. Coming back to it as an adult now, I can see this was totally inspired by Smash Bros, right? The focus isn't as much on the fighting, but on platforming. There are a ton of items, and grabbing those items is a big part of the game. It definitely feels a lot more like a party game rather than a fighting game, because as we all know, Smash isn't a fighting game. I'm joking, okay, chill. Yeah, the fighting in this one definitely isn't as good, and it was very surprising to me given how much I played this in the past, and how much I thought I loved these games. Maybe they didn't age well, or maybe my stupid child brain didn't know what a good game was back then. Probably my stupid child brain. My god, playing this is so painful, nothing makes sense, everything is mashing. You mash on wake up and it works. You have a minigame mid-combo where it's basically who mashes the hardest wins. You can do block strings into grabs without the opponent being able to do anything. Frame data? What's that? Character balance? What's that? We just do stuff because we thought it'd be cool. And there's some credit to this way of thinking, but god, it is infuriating to play this thing multiplayer. Plus, when you do an ultimate, there are usually 2 or 3 animated parts to that ultimate. And during this time, you play this minigame of pressing the right buttons. You spend a lot of time not fighting because of this minigame. But I can totally see why Ultimate Ninja was the most popular of the two. You know, aside from the obvious, the game was on PS2, which is way more popular than the GameCube. Ultimate Ninja had so much more fan service and so much more content than Clash of Ninja. Cinematic ults, more characters, a story mode that can be played from the perspective of each character, and you play these to unlock all the characters in the game, giving you a sense of progression. Now, at the end of each story, the music isn't nearly as epic as Clash of Ninja, but what is? At the end of the credits though, there is a secret message for each character, like, do you have what it takes to conquer the tale of the Shachihoko? I think they meant the Shikaku. You got unlockable figures, music, voice lines. Man, they really had loot boxes back in 2006, huh? And you also have a mission mode full of missions where you start at the Ninja Academy, and as you rank up, you can tackle D rank missions, C rank missions, etc. I mean, the missions are all just fighting with some interesting conditions occasionally. Sometimes you gotta finish the fight with a certain item in your pocket. Sometimes you gotta finish the fight with an ultimate attack, but it's all still the same fighting system. It doesn't really change. It's so repetitive. And you actually have to beat most of the missions to unlock QB Naruto and Cursed Mark Sasuke. And this is top tier weird. Let me explain why. Both Clash of Ninja and Ultimate Ninja originally came out in Japan back in 2003. 3 years later, the games made their way to the US. In the original Japanese version, both Naruto and Sasuke can transform into their powered-up versions by doing a level 3 ultimate. In the West, however, Bandai Namco decided that they would be separate characters, thus removing the transformation from the base characters and making us play through these painful mission mode to unlock 2 extremely broken characters. I mean, at least previously, you had to land the ultimate to power up the character. Now you can just select them from the menu? Why? I don't know, so they could say they had more characters? I mean, if you look at these 2 games side by side, they're both trying to accomplish the same thing. They're both trying to please the Naruto audience with an action fighting game. But on one hand, you have a focus on the fighting system itself, albeit a rushed attempt at this, lacking a lot of content. And on the other, you have a terribly broken fighting system, but with 12 characters total. Yes, I'm not counting the powered up Naruto and Sasuke, you're not fooling me. And also a lot of single player content, cinematic ultimates, all the fan service you could want from a Naruto game in 2006. These 2 games are like complete polar opposites because the content of Ultimate Ninja was exactly what Clash needed, and the solid foundations of a fighting game were exactly what Ultimate needed. And unfortunately, as an adult replaying Ultimate Ninja now, all of that content just isn't worth it if the base game isn't fun, because ultimately you're just replaying the same bad combat system. I don't know if the series got a lot better in future entries, or if I just had a dumb brain that thought this was actually good, but time will tell if this show keeps going. For now, we're gonna put Ultimate Ninja on rank E, making it the worst Naruto game of all time. We're gonna talk about 3 more games. 3 games that were the first steps towards the Naruto open world game that never truly happened. One of the biggest fantasies of Naruto fans all over the world is to be able to roam around Konoha and the surrounding neighborhood to visit their favorite places from the show and interact with their favorite characters. From an action-adventure format all the way to something more akin to a real open world RPG, these were Naruto's first steps into the open world genre. Uzumaki Chronicles. This is the very first attempt at creating an environment that you could actually explore in Naruto. Not exactly an open world yet, but a game that gave you semi-open areas for you to fight in and explore. You start on Konoha, go to the Hokage's office and accept a mission. Then you select the area you want to go to complete that mission. And along the way, you might be attacked, which leads to fighting in these open areas, which are actually quite varied. Some missions will be more than fighting though. There will be some light puzzles, some light platforming, even some light exploration. But the focus is definitely the combat, and the combat system isn't bad. There's enough freedom for you to create your own combos with light and strong attacks, as well as different jutsu like the iconic Power Strike. Yeah, the Rasengan is called Power Strike for some reason. However, this is a baby game for babies, and you can just beat it by doing the Power Strike over and over again and not even engage with the combat system if you don't want to. The entire story in this game is made up. In fact, for most of the game, there's no connected storyline. Each mission behaves as its own mini story. But despite Naruto's fandom very justified hatred for filler, the stories in this game are so bad they become good. To me, these stories were hilarious, and part of that is also due to how the voice actors were delivering each line.
You'll just have to ask one of the thieves.
How?
Lure one of them in and capture him.
How?
But for as fun as these cutscenes are, missions often follow the same structure, so the game becomes quite repetitive really fast. Especially since most of the missions feel like filler. I mean, filler within filler, a new level of filler. This game is also a rather unique RPG. After each fight, the orbs that enemies drop are actually the XP that you must pick up manually, which is frustrating because sometimes it just falls down a hole. But at the same time, it's pretty fun because there's this whole chip system where you can buy chips that can buff your character in different ways or straight up give you some new moves, and then you have to fit them into these boards, feeding as many as you can into them, which is kind of satisfying when you finally fill them up. However, to play and enjoy this game, you have to put up with some pretty annoying stuff. First of all, the camera is inverted and there's no option to change it, which makes the exploration portions of this game really frustrating if you're not used to that. It's also an old school game in terms of save systems. If you die, there's no autosave. There are no checkpoints. You have to go back to your previous save. And you can only save while you're in Konoha. So I guess if you die mid-mission, you have to replay the whole thing again. Luckily, you can pause during battle and just use as many healing items as you can, though I don't know, this kind of feels like cheating sometimes. Also, you can't block in combat, but enemies can, which is weird and feels unfair sometimes. And finally, graphics. I have no problem with old graphics, but I'm personally not a big fan of the style itself. It feels like they went for a more realistic approach. In a way, this feels like the precursor to Jump Force in terms of how it looks. In conclusion, this game kept me very entertained with the funny voice acting and the funny stories, and the chip system was actually very engaging. Decent combat though, even though you can also circumvent it by just spamming jutsu. And eventually I became really tired of playing it because of the repetitive mission design. I never got over the inverted camera and the other outdated mechanics this game has. So we're gonna put it right there at D rank above Clash of Ninja, which if you remember last episode, Clash of Ninja was very thin as far as content goes, but had a solid fighting system. That makes Uzumaki Chronicles the new best Naruto game of all time. For now, let's check out the next game. Uzumaki Chronicles was nothing but the very first step towards an open world, but was still very far from being the exploration game that Naruto fans wanted. But this next game is what I would consider the reason why Bandai Namco is the company that releases Naruto games nowadays instead of their competition. It's time to talk about Ultimate Ninja 2, the sequel to what's currently our worst Naruto game of all time. This game went above and beyond to improve over the first one, especially in story mode, where for the first time you could actually walk around and explore Konoha in a 3D video game. You could accept missions and meet those characters at specific locations to start them, and everything, I mean everything, was voice acted. From main missions to side missions, even random NPCs just standing around were voice acted. And they all had interesting or funny things to say.
There's a rock in my shoe.
Okay, Asuma, I'm just gonna go in here. You can play through the Naruto story complete with cutscenes, and when you're done, there's a whole other original story, giving this game a good amount of content. I mean, you can just beat both stories in about 5 hours, but there are still a ton of missions outside of that, and many of these are quite interesting. For instance, the Taijutsu challenge, where you must win the battle against Might Guy without using any ninjutsu, or don't receive a single hit from your opponent, or just mess around playing some posing minigames or handstand races. The roster was also increased dramatically, and there is a good attention to the source material here, because now everyone gets a special effect after activating their ultimates, and they stayed very faithful to the show. Kakashi and Sasuke, for instance, they activate the Sharingan and are now able to use jutsu from your opponent, copying their entire moveset. The third Hokage starts losing health rapidly after using the Death Seal, and Itachi turns the entire world into Tsukuyomi, making your opponent move in very slow motion. From Ultimate Ninja to Ultimate Ninja 2, there was so many improvements made, but the core gameplay is still mostly a party game. It was polished, there were a lot of good improvements, like they increased the number of items that can spawn exponentially. The gameplay felt more varied because there were more items, and it doesn't feel nearly as clunky. But for instance, you throw Itachi's ultimate, the opponent blocks, you can still grab your opponent before they're able to do anything. It's one of those games that asks frame data? What's that? This leads to a very unbalanced roster in favor of fan service. And that becomes very clear when you look at the ultimates. The ultimates are even longer than before. They still take half of your health bar if they land, which just promotes this dumb mashy playstyle. But the worst part of it is the substitution jutsu, because now you can just spam it. You can substitute mid-combo and there's no limit to how many subs you can use, which leads to a lot of these situations. In conclusion, Ultimate Ninja 2 has tons of content, a very good story mode and lots of fan service, but the battle system is still very mashy and the roster is just terribly unbalanced. It's time to rank it, and we're gonna give Ultimate Ninja 2 the first C rank in this show, making it the new best Naruto game of all time. Sorry, Uzumaki Chronicles, your victory was short-lived. But will the next game surpass this? Stay tuned, because the next game is coming right up. The vision of an open-world Naruto wasn't fully realized until 2007, and it wasn't Tomy or Bandai that fulfilled that vision, it was Ubisoft, with Rise of a Ninja. With Rise of a Ninja, we finally saw a fully realized Konoha that you could walk around, race around the city, even climb walls and jump across buildings, complete with nameless NPCs and the characters we knew from the show, all tied up nicely with some RPG mechanics that would unlock new ways of exploring the place, like the ability to climb walls or walk on water. As time passed, you would unlock new combos and new jutsu that would not only be useful in battle, but in exploration, platforming, and puzzle solving. Rise of a Ninja felt like the first complete single-player experience. Even though it had multiplayer, it didn't feel like that was the focus, like Clash of Ninja or the Ultimate Ninja series. It felt like a complete game with the story mode alone. And it's not like the multiplayer mode was lacking, in fact it was one of the first Naruto games, if not the first Naruto game, to feature online play. And you could do quick matches, create your own lobbies, or even play ranked matches with a decent roster of characters. Problem is, this combat mode was definitely not designed for multiplayer. First of all, some characters can't even punch their opponents. And by that I mean hitboxes and hurtboxes just aren't there. I'm punching Kakashi, look at that, why didn't that hit? Did he get Obito's Sharingan already? He's just phasing through my attacks. And for a game that has a list of combos for each character, most of these combos aren't even real combos. If you hold block, you can interrupt a lot of these, and it's got a good variety of combos, and each character's jutsu will play their own minigame, which is awesome fan service. But but playing this game with another human is just mashing different attacks and keep substituting out of your opponent's combos until one of your health runs out. And out of the 12 characters, let's say you have 4 that would be viable. The rest are broken, and not in a good way. Fortunately, these problems weren't so evident when playing single player. Outside of the jutsu minigames, which were fun at first, but I can tell you how many times I've watched this shadow clone jutsu animation, because it's literally the best thing you could do for damage, and it sort of disrupts the pace of battle too. But yeah, in short, I like the combat, I like the combo and jutsu variety, but I don't like it as a multiplayer game, since a lot of the characters aren't viable and it's a spam festival of substitution jutsu. But combat feels like such a small part of the game, which is why this game's story feels like a complete game on its own. It does a wonderful job of placing you right in the world of Naruto, right at the center of Konoha, and as soon as you boot up the game, it hits you with the anime's original soundtrack, and it even uses scenes from the anime itself as cutscenes, and sometimes mixed with gameplay portions or quick-time events done in an expert way, like the moment Jiraiya throws Naruto into the pit and he has to summon Gamabunta to survive. These are the moments that make this game really shine, how it tells the Naruto story, crafting unique gameplay moments for what each scene requires, instead of making everything a random fight, which was the solution that most Naruto games had. The problem is when it starts not telling the Naruto story and instead asks you to stop some bandits from stealing potatoes. This game has its fair share of filler missions, and filler on its own is not necessarily bad, as we've talked about in Uzumaki Chronicles, but this filler in Rise of a Ninja is really bad. It's boring, it's uninspired, and it's clearly used as padding to increase playtime. And it's usually during these missions that the game asks you to do some incredibly frustrating platforming puzzles, which require a precision that the game doesn't have. Naruto's momentum feels off in this entire game. It takes Naruto a long time to reach top speed, but as soon as he jumps, he speeds up, so the platforming, the movement feels very off in the open world. That said, it is the first time that it feels like we have Konoha and the surrounding areas as a complete space that we can explore. The game's graphics are gorgeous. I would totally still play a Naruto game looking like this nowadays, and the original anime cutscenes and soundtrack just make you feel like you are watching the Naruto show. It puts you right in that universe effortlessly. And the crafted minigames for every moment and every jutsu is a great attention to detail. However, the combat system is spammy, especially in multiplayer. It's really not a great combat system. Platforming feels bad, and it's got lots of filler missions. But that's not enough to keep it from being our first B rank game on our list. I would say it's barely a B though. I expect this to be a very low B rank on the list by the end of this show. But for now, it is gonna be our best Naruto game of all time. Rise of a Ninja is still a fan favorite to this day, but let's switch gears and take a look at some of the weirdest gems in Naruto game history. Let's start with Naruto Ninja Council. For the first time in the ranking of Naruto games, we're going to be looking at a handheld console game, and the Game Boy Advance was an awesome platform, but it wasn't particularly known for action games. That said, the Ninja Council series had 8 games total, released in the West alone, so it must be doing something right? The first Ninja Council is where it all started. It's a fairly simple side-scroller beat-em-up. You can pick Naruto or Sasuke to play through the story, which is completely filler, and each one of them has their fair share of unique jutsu and an attack button that does one combo, and then you have a jump button. Yeah, that's it. There weren't a lot of buttons on the Game Boy Advance. And right from the get-go, you can see that this is gonna be a budget game. I mean, why else would Naruto be killing snakes? That said, the levels weren't as straightforward as simply walking to the right and killing everyone in your way. There were actually multiple levels with hidden rooms, and you would find collectibles, and if you got all the collectibles, you would unlock Kakashi by the end of it, which then allowed you to play as Kakashi through the entire story with his own jutsu and everything else. It had some platforming, which was as good as you would expect from a Game Boy Advance game, and even a few puzzles. Levels also gave you elemental scrolls that were used to overcome some obstacles. Each level would give you a different element, something they could totally build up on if they only let you keep the scroll after finishing a level. I could see a lot of interesting level design ideas being built around the different scrolls. Unfortunately, they never did that, so you were limited to holding one scroll at a time. Some of its limitations also show quite fast. Every time you turn around, the camera does this turn thing that is incredibly jarring. Enemies will be popping on screen randomly when they should be visible already. Combat is repetitive because your options are limited, and the enemies on screen don't force you to switch your tactics that often. And if you're having trouble, charging up a jutsu makes you immune, so you can always just stop, charge something up, and kill your enemies, if you have the chakra, of course. That said, boss fights were the coolest thing in this game. Each boss was unique, and this is where the game really shined. This was the only moment when the game forced you to think of when to attack and when to dodge. And it was complete with unique finishers. For instance, when you fight Kiba, you can defeat him normally, or you can fail to charge one of your jutsu, which will cause Naruto to fart, dealing insane damage to Kiba. It's full of little Easter eggs like this. So even if the levels were boring, at least the boss fights would propel you forward, because you wanted to see what's coming next. And it's awesome that you actually had unique finishers depending on whether you were playing with Naruto, Sasuke, or even Kakashi. Plus, unlockables gave this game some longevity. That said, it wasn't that fun to play thanks to all of its other problems. So we're gonna rank it at E. Not the worst Naruto game of all time, that award still goes to Ultimate Ninja, but let's see how the next game does in the ranking
Of Naruto games.
I don't know if you remember when we talked about Clash of Ninja. It was 2 episodes ago, which may as well have been last year. But it had a solid foundation as a Naruto fighting game. Sure, it had its balance issues and it was really thin on combat, but the basics were there, so I've been really excited to see where they took the series with Clash of Ninja 2. Oh boy, was I surprised. At first, Clash of Ninja 2 feels like the complete game that Clash of Ninja was meant to be. You start story mode and you're immediately thrown out of the academy and into the start of Naruto's life as a ninja, celebrating with Iruka-sensei at Ichiraku Ramen. And you play the whole thing until you defeat Gaara at the end of the Chunin exam arc. Story mode even had some levels that broke the monotony of fight after fight. Sometimes you would have 4 characters on stage battling each other, or even teaming up to defeat one other character, as they introduced this new game mode that supported up to 4 players, and it's complete chaos. As a gimmick, it's definitely fun, and it brought some variety to the fight scenarios during story mode. In multiplayer, it's just chaos. Also, in the middle of story mode, you fight a bunch of clones in what almost seems like a side-scroller level, which made it feel more like playing an actual story and less like playing a bunch of fights in a row. And that was a massive improvement over the first game. It even includes an unfairly difficult boss fight against Gaara by the end. Like, oh my god, that was tough. And overall, the combat system remained largely unchanged. You've got that solid foundation with the occasional wonky hitboxes, like how the hell did that clash? But what the first game needed was more content, and this second game definitely delivered it, not only with story mode but also with a ton of unlockables and an expanded roster of characters. And in this game, expanding the roster is actually a big deal because every character is rather unique. It even includes Kankuro fighting with a puppet and everything, and that comes with a whole new set of rules. Everything you do in this game gives you money, which then you use to buy different game modes, new story missions, which will take place after the game's story, and yes, they're all filler, and even buy collectibles and characters, everything in the shop. And at first, it felt like a really good progression system, and then they inflate the prices like crazy. And after you buy the characters with those inflated prices, you quickly understand why they weren't available from the start. Instead of focusing on balancing the game, they absolutely doubled down on how broken their characters are. For instance, Sharingan Sasuke takes half of your health bar with 3 buttons, Sharingan Kakashi takes half of your health bar with a grab, and has a frame 1 parry that is really hard to punish. Rock Lee opens his gates, making his ultimate take 80% of your health bar, and it's an unblockable attack that teleports to your location. I mean, sure, he's losing health when he activates the gates, but damn, a tracking unblockable ultimate for 80%. And then there's the joke characters. You pick Akamaru and watch your opponent's attacks miss because he's too small, or struggle to play as Kankuro's puppet without the puppeteer to complete his moveset. I kinda love it that everyone in this game is broken, but then some characters are even more broken than the broken characters, and it kinda turns this solid fighting game with a good foundation into a game that you play for fun for a couple of hours because it's really gimmicky and the broken characters just discourage you from finding any depth in its systems. If I was to make tournaments for Clash of Ninja 2, more than half of this roster would have easily been banned. It definitely is a much better game than the first one, and it came out only a few months after it. Honestly, if I bought the first game and this came out only a few months after, I would have felt insulted. That said, even if it is a better game with proper balancing, it could become an actual good game, but at this point, it wasn't quite there yet, so we're gonna rank it at C, right below Ultimate Ninja 2. Let's see how the next game does. At the start of this video, I told you that the Ninja Council series had 8 games in total published in the West, which means I have a lot of Ninja Council left to cover, so let's move right on to Ninja Council 2. First impression isn't bad. The combat animations look a lot more fluid. You can now vanish teleport on command. The jutsu system is done with inputs instead of that old charging thing, though they did get rid of the chakra meter, which means you can't just kinda spam this thing. There's like an invisible cooldown system that only applies to some jutsu. It's weird. And last but not least, you you can swap characters on the fly between Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. And when you beat the game, you even unlock Rock Lee, so he becomes a part of that rotation. So far, it's looking like it's gonna be a much better game, and then, right after the tutorial, the game hits you with this song.
Oh my god. Oh my f***ing god.
Out of all the games we talked about today, this one is the weirdest in my opinion, because if you like the boss fights and exploration in Ninja Council, this one got rid of all of it. It took the best things that Ninja Council did and threw them all away. Sure, switching characters is cool, the jutsu system was improved, and the animations look smoother, but that came at the cost of level design, boss fights, and unlockables. The only thing worth unlocking here is Rock Lee, which you get after beating the game anyway, which by that point, the chances of you wanting to replay it are very low. I mean, look at these levels. Half of your screen is just gray. The camera could be panned up so we could see a bit more of the environment. Instead, we just have this bad camera angle. And half of your screen is empty. The exploration and puzzles in these levels were completely taken out. And sure, you do have some jumping platforms here and there, but the levels are much more straightforward. Ninja Council 2 became the game where you just run and beat everyone, and there's really not much else to it. Boss fights aren't as unique as the first game. They don't force you to change strategies or counter specific movesets. In fact, Sakura can just brute force her way through most of the game. She has a special move that activates a timer, and while the timer is active, every time you hit the attack button, it's a special move. And let's not forget this. I guess the story is canon now though. I never thought I'd say this, but I'd much rather have the filler if the canon is coming at the cost of everything else. It baffles me how much they misunderstood their value with their first game and how much worse the sequel ended up being. I thought the Ninja Council series would only go up from the first game, but we're actually gonna rank this below Ninja Council. So far below that it's actually gonna be our first F-rank game, making it the worst Naruto game of all time, at least so far. Ultimate Ninja 3 was really exciting for multiple reasons. If you look at our current ranking of Naruto games, you'll see the first Ultimate Ninja is near the bottom of the list, and Ultimate Ninja 2 is actually near the top. The difference between these two games was astounding, so I couldn't wait to see what else they added with Ultimate Ninja 3, which would cover the entirety of Naruto pre-time skip. Combat remained largely unchanged, though with a few adjustments that made combos feel a bit more freeform. It wasn't as stiff, definitely felt a lot better, but that also led to the usual anime game broken stuff like infinite combos, which are countered by spamming substitutions. The game definitely feels better, but this combat system still sucks in my opinion. They increased the number of stages, they absolutely blew up the roster. I mean, look at these two side by side, that is crazy. And while most of the characters play the same, occasionally you will find a couple that are actually pretty unique. For example, Tayuya. Tayuya would fight with her flute using sound to attack you, and every character had some sort of transformation or power up, and in Tayuya's case, she would just summon these giants with every attack. Absolutely ridiculous, and I love it. I like that they also shortened the ultimate attack animation. Instead of them just having multiple scenes, it's now just one and done. That really helped the pace of matches. Overall, nothing but good things. Just don't expect any sort of balance from a game like this. It is 100% fan service over balance. Let's check out story mode. The anime had just wrapped up the Rescue Sasuke arc, bringing about the end of the original Naruto anime. But this game included all the arcs. It did all of them. It was abridged for sure, about 4 fights per arc, fast forwarding through the story until they reached the final arc where they actually spend a bit more time, and I love that. We had just played 2 Ultimate Ninja games, no need to painfully replay all of those arcs again. This abridged structure was awesome at capturing those key moments, especially when accompanied by cutscenes that look like this. Oh my god, this was so good looking. Even nowadays, you look at this and obviously the graphics are outdated, but the camera tricks, the motion effects, the action of these cutscenes still holds up extremely well. And it wasn't just the CG cutscenes sprinkled throughout story mode, the regular cutscenes also received some upgrades with more dynamic camera shots, and everything was, once again, fully voiced. And I think for the first time ever in a Naruto game, you actually had the option of switching between English voices and Japanese voices. Up to this point, if you bought the English version of the game, you would play with English voices. If you wanted the Japanese voices, you needed to buy the Japanese version of the game. So if you watched the anime in Japanese, but you lived in the West, the voices were always a bit weird. You weren't used to them, and this was huge for a lot of fans, myself included. The only problem with story mode was that unlike Ultimate Ninja 2, you could no longer free roam around Konoha, talking to the different ninja in the city, accepting missions and all of that. You simply started the story missions from a menu. But as it turns out, that problem wasn't really a problem because this story mode wasn't all there was for single player content. There was this other story mode where it would immediately put you in the middle of Konoha, and oh my god, I was surprised to see the freedom of movement you had within the city. You could move freely in a 3D environment, you could double jump, you would automatically stick to walls, climb on rooftops. It was so fluid, it felt so good. Ultimate Ninja 3 is the Spider-Man 2 of Naruto games. There, I said it. There has never been free roaming like this in Naruto games ever. Not up to this point and not since. Sure, Rise of a Ninja has a bigger city. Storm also did its free roaming Konoha thing, but neither of those games could you simply jump up to a wall and start running up. You would always have to find either specific spots or stop at a wall to gather chakra. And as a kid, this freedom, this snappiness of this felt amazing. As an adult, having played many other open world games, the sense of wonder is no longer there, but it remains incredibly impressive how much this game improved over Ultimate Ninja 2. And if you ask me, I'd rather have this type of free roaming than anything that Rise of a Ninja, Broken Bond, or Storm ever did with their free roaming. Now, the story for this mode isn't anything out of this world. In fact, it's quite ridiculous, and the game activities are a bit boring. Basically, all the ninja in the village are trying to gather these crystals in an all-out battle royale. The winner gets to add a new rule to the village, and Naruto wants to be a Hokage, so that's the rule he's gonna add. Gathering crystals means finding these shiny things on the ground or battling other ninja to steal their crystals. So it is a bit repetitive, but the free roaming keeps it fun, I guess. Plus, some jonin don't really want to fight you, so they challenge you to some of these mini games like physical exercise with Guy or climbing a tree in less than a minute, and you can actually play these against a friend later on. However, it's while free roaming in Konoha that you also find the old side missions from Ultimate Ninja 2 with the interesting gimmicks. So you can spend a lot of time here in Konoha accepting missions and completing them, and the whole thing has a light RPG system to it where you unlock new abilities and you can equip different characters with other jutsu that they then can take into battle. Looking back at the final pros and cons from Ultimate Ninja 2, I feel like this game, Ultimate Ninja 3, has the exact same cons. Battle system is still mashy and characters are still unbalanced. But the pros, they've all been revamped. Still has a ton of content, story mode isn't just good, it is excellent. Tons of fan service with all these characters and how loyal they try to keep them to the show. And I've gotta add free roaming breakthrough, because exploring Konoha with that freedom was really a defining moment in the series for me. So with that said, Ultimate Ninja 3 is definitely better than Ultimate Ninja 2, but is it good enough to make it past our current best Naruto game of all time, Rise of a Ninja? I'm gonna say no. Combat is a bit mashy on both. Rise of a Ninja also had the endless substitution problem, and the game just felt broken as far as hitboxes and balance goes. But then single player wise, Rise of a Ninja definitely felt more unique. Ultimate Ninja 3 did its best to not just offer battle after battle in every story mission, but I feel like Rise of a Ninja tailored their missions for each story moment a lot more often, including original anime cutscenes that put you right in the shoes of Naruto at crucial moments. So we're gonna put Ultimate Ninja 3 at a B rank right below Rise of a Ninja. Let's see if our next game has what it takes to conquer the ranking of Naruto games. We can't talk about Ultimate Ninja without talking about its direct competitor, the Clash of Ninja series. In the past, I've said this game has a really solid foundation to be an awesome fighting game, but it always fell short for some reason or another. This is their third attempt, their third Clash of Ninja game, and this time they're going from the GameCube to the Wii with Clash of Ninja Revolution. This came out around the same time as Ultimate Ninja 2, so it doesn't feature characters from the entire Naruto series. Instead, it goes up until the Tsunade arc. But it's weird that they actually removed characters from the roster. Some of them I get it, remove the joke characters, make Sharingan Kakashi and Sasuke a part of the default characters by giving them a power up during battle, and do the same for Kyuubi Chakra Naruto, but removing Haku, Zabuza, Kiba, I don't get it. The roster isn't bad, it's got a decent size, but when you're competing against the roster of Ultimate Ninja, why are you removing characters? They were essentially done already. To me, the roster of Clash of Ninja will always be more impressive than the roster of Ultimate Ninja, because even though it's smaller, the characters play a lot more uniquely. It's not as easy adding a character to Clash of Ninja as it is to Ultimate Ninja, but removing characters from the roster was a bit of a shock, to be honest. Combat-wise, they made a few additions. First, they added obstacles to every stage. You could hide behind these boxes boxes to dodge kunai, and then come out from behind the boxes with attack buttons. The obstacles mostly got in the way. I wasn't a big fan of this addition. They also added these stage transitions that trigger whenever you hit an opponent into a wall hard enough, I think. They always felt a bit inconsistent to me. And during this running animation, you can hit a button to punch them and deal extra damage, or you can hit a direction to get in front of them, which gives you a juggle opportunity. And your opponent needs to guess what you pressed so they can counter you. Adding this random factor to a fighting game is never a great idea, but I like getting the stage transitions leading into more damage, be it a simple punch or a full juggle. So this new feature definitely has its ups and downs. There's still some wonkiness to the hitboxes. When you sub out of a combo, sometimes you don't show up behind your opponent, sometimes you just show up in front of them, so you spent a whole bar and you're still getting comboed. It feels like the game has improved, but some of the issues that have been there since the start still haven't been fixed. Though I will say this roster is a lot more balanced than the previous games, and to me that was probably the biggest improvement so far. Not to say the balance is perfect, but joke characters are gone. There's no one that is just like ridiculously overpowered. Everyone feels broken in a different way, but some characters can take advantage of the wonky hitboxes and the inconsistencies of substitution a bit better than others, and I think that's the major balance issue this game has. Story mode also improved a bit. It's still told through this visual novel style, which when you put it next to Ultimate Ninja's cutscenes, it's just clearly inferior. But they do give you some specific requirements for each fight, like finishing a fight with a specific move, or only use taijutsu. My favorite was this one with Neji. Neji wanted to practice his 8-palm rotation before the Chunin exams. So 10-10 throws projectiles and you have to time your parry 10 times to clear this mission. I love this. Not only is it teaching you one of Neji's abilities in combat, it's also practicing your reactions. At the same time, it makes this mission not just another fight you have to get through in story mode. So yeah, story mode also saw a small improvement in my opinion. Other than that, you still have your unlockables. They didn't have a store with inflated prices this time. Instead, what you needed to do to unlock characters is beat arcade mode with specific characters. So just fight against the CPU, which I know isn't the best, but unlocking characters isn't nearly as painful right now. And then you can also tackle this arcade mode with 2 players or get 4 players fighting against each other in this mode that's just full of camera issues. Again, it works well as a gimmick, but the camera is just all over the place. Which reminds me, they kinda ruined Kankuro. I really like Kankuro's puppet gimmick. I think they nailed his gameplay in Clash of Ninja 2, and it's mostly unchanged in Clash of Ninja Revolution. But whatever they did to the camera has made it really frustrating to fight him. In a 1v1, the game usually has no camera issues, unless you're fighting Kankuro. When that happens, it's like you have 3 characters on stage, and the camera starts spinning like crazy, like it doesn't know which angle to pick. It really breaks the game. All in all, it's definitely a better game than Clash 2, but a lot of its issues still persist, and you would expect them to be solved by the 3rd game. That said, the roster is more competitive than ever, which brings this game another step closer to being that really good Naruto fighting game we all want. We're gonna rank this at C, right above Clash of Ninja 2, but it's still not that solid of a fighting game to overtake the sheer amount of content and entertainment that Ultimate Ninja 2 brought us. And this pains me a little bit, because I feel like Clash of Ninja could easily take this entire ranking. There are simply no competitive Naruto fighting games, and this is really close to being a really solid one of those. Maybe the sequel will finally be the fighting game we want, but I'm honestly starting to lose hope. Uzumaki Chronicles 2. It got a decent number of updates over the first game. You can actually play a decent number of characters in this one instead of just having them being timed assists that you can play for a short amount of time. The story is still original, but this time it's fully connected. They actually tell a story from start to finish in these story missions. They added co-op, they added 2-player battles, and every character gets a chipboard this time around. Sounds good so far, except that every single one of these upgrades is super flawed. If you don't want to hear me rant about your favorite childhood game, click away right now. I'm about to trash your entire childhood. First of all, combat has remained mostly unchanged, but they actually call Naruto's jutsu the Rasengan instead of Power Strike. Good upgrade. And you can still do Naruto's combos, juggling opponents with shadow clones and such. I really like this combat system. And now that you have multiple characters, you can actually discover combos with everyone else, except it seems like they forgot to give everyone else a moveset. Kakashi's light attack combo is just these 2 punches, which granted, the 2 punches kill every enemy in the game pretty much. We got 2-punch Kakashi over here, but why didn't he get combos like Naruto? Choji, for instance, has a 3-hit combo, but the first 2 hits are the exact same punch. What the hell happened there? The only characters that are fun to play taijutsu with to figure out combos are Naruto and Rock Lee. Maybe Neji a bit too. Oh, and I guess Might Guy, because they literally just took Rock Lee's moveset and copied it for Guy. That's it. That's all they did. This game feels unfinished in so many places, not only in this moveset stuff, but the chips menu, for instance, it doesn't have any music, which feels like a very odd choice. And speaking of, I love the chipboards in the first game. It felt like I was choosing which buffs I wanted to take into battle, trying to fill the entire thing. It was a nice puzzle. The new chipboards suck. You can just shove a bunch of ships in there until you beat the game. Only in the post-game do you start optimizing your space. And even then, you can always upgrade your board to get even more space. And what's worse is that every character gets a board now. And while that sounds good, because more boards equals more fun, what actually happens is that every time you get a new chip, you have to go through everyone's boards to equip it. It becomes busy work. They had a good thing going in the first game, and I think they ruined it in this one. Also, most chips have to be bought from the store, and they are sort of expensive, which means the game wants you to do side missions. But luckily, side missions have a lot more variety this time around. It's not just beating up monkeys, even though you do have to beat up a lot of monkeys in these missions. You have missions where you have to like defeat enemies on boats using only ninja tools, or destroy crossbows, or protect these boxes. Most of them are still just defeating enemies or chasing a shadow on the map, but you know, at least it's not just all that. And then we get to the main story, and this is where, in my opinion, the game improved the most. You're actually following a story from mission to mission, instead of each mission being its own mini story. It's still an original tale, doesn't follow the canon. Instead, the villain is someone called the Master Puppet. These missions also feel a bit more elaborate, more complete. It's not just traveling to a place and defeating enemies. This time there's exploring, there's platforming. It takes you on a ton of different environments, both indoors and outdoors. There are escape sequences, there are even puzzles. And whenever you're stuck, you can just summon your clones and they'll point to the solution. There are boss fights with the unique mechanics. This was a huge step forward for Chronicles. And when you finish it all, you have another story to play with Kakashi as the protagonist. And as you play these stories, you unlock the characters that you can play with, which also makes it a lot more engaging. And to help with that engagement, the game also features co-op. You can play the story missions or the side missions with a friend who just has to press start anytime they want to join. The problem is, and I say this without any hyperbole, this is the worst co-op experience I have ever played. And it's all because of the perspective. You see, when you're playing on your own, left stick controls the character, right stick controls the camera. The usual, right? By the way, the camera controls are still inverted and I hate it. But when someone joins your game, the camera will just follow the second player. So none of you have control over the camera. And it's an absolute nightmare to play. This whole co-op system, just throw in at the trash. It might as well not exist. All I had to do was split screen. It would have fixed everything. Also, 2-player battles. Throw them in the garbage. The game was so not designed to be a fighting game. There's no block button, which means you can just do this to win. And they didn't even try to balance it. I mean, it's bad enough that some characters don't have combos like we mentioned, but then in comes Itachi and what the hell is happening? So in conclusion, a step forward from the first game, as it's not as repetitive. It takes you through a lot more environments, having more puzzles, platforming and exploration does make it easier to play through, but so many of the new features they added are just terrible. Co-op and versus are unplayable, and I really didn't like what they did with the chip systems. So with that, let's rank it. It's definitely better than the first Uzumaki Chronicles, but not by much given all these shortcomings. So it's gonna take the top spot at D rank. And I don't know if I'm disappointed because I simply expected more, or if it's because you guys praised it too much. I feel like I was deceived. Anyway, let's move on to our next game. Hi. It's a brand new day. Stayed up all night playing this other Naruto game, and as it turns out, one night was all I needed to finish it. Ultimate Ninja Heroes. I feel like I need to explain what this game is. If you've played many Naruto games in the past, or if you've watched past Ranking of Naruto games episodes, then you're already very familiar with the Ultimate Ninja series on PlayStation 2. Those games were huge, and we actually already ranked 3 of them. Ultimate Ninja Heroes was basically the same thing, but on the PSP. And this was the first Ultimate Ninja Heroes in the West, but in Japan, this was actually the second. The first Heroes game in Japan was a game that came out in the West as Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2 Phantom Fortress. So maybe I'm playing these out of order, or maybe not. That's how they came out in the West, and that's where I live, damn it. Gameplay wise, this is pretty much Ultimate Ninja 2, which was a lot more fluid than the first Ultimate Ninja, but it was a substitution festival. I swear, sometimes the CPU is just impossible to beat. They will sub out of literally every attack you throw at them. It's so frustrating. Ultimate Ninja 2 though is known for the amount of content it had. It gave you Konoha to explore, you had a ton of voice acting, the story mode, everything. This one is a bit thin when it comes to content. There is no story mode, just a series of fights. Though they do bring a twist to their Heroes game mode. Here you can pick a team of 3 characters and you fight with each one of them one at a time. It's not a tag system, you can't change them mid-battle. You'll just fight until one of them dies and then the next one comes in, just like King of Fighters. What's interesting about these teams is that each character has an item that can be used before battle. Some items items will damage the enemy before the battle begins, others will heal your teammates, others will give you buffs or debuff your opponents. And on top of that, if you choose one of the preset teams, you will also get a team item, which will normally buff the entire team. And the cool thing is, there are hidden teams. There are characters that if you put them together, they also get a unique bonus, but they're not the preset teams that you can see on display. So as you unlock new characters, you can find new teams, and that's kind of cool. This game is also an RPG. Every time you clear an encounter, you get some points that you can use to level up your characters. And you also get scrolls which you can use to unlock side missions. But it does the Naruto thing of unlocking new missions as you graduate from the academy, become a genin, a chunin, etc. So there's some progression to be felt there. And that's it. As you can see, it's super light on content. You can beat it in a couple of hours, and what you beat is just a series of battles using the Ultimate Ninja 2 fighting system. I do like what they did with some ultimate attacks and victory screens once you beat a game mode or your ninja rank goes up. I think that with the limited specs of the PSP, they actually made some cool looking animations. There are also a few unblockables to get, like images or movies, but you know, it's a total grind since all there is in this game is fight after fight without much variety. The game supports wireless multiplayer if you had a friend with another PSP and another copy of the game, but you know how I feel about these types of multiplayer. It's just so situational. I mean, how many people did you guys know that had a PSP with this game on it? Can't be many. While on a home console, you always have the option to play locally against a friend. All you need is an extra controller. On a portable device, you need 2 consoles and 2 copies of the game. It's just not the same. I think this game will actually be super easy to rank, as it's pretty much Ultimate Ninja 2 with a smaller roster and without the content of Ultimate Ninja 2. So it's basically Ultimate Ninja 1, except it still plays a lot better than the first Ultimate Ninja. That was a bit clunky. And it's also got those unlockables that place Ninja Council at the top of E. So that's exactly where this is gonna go. The top of E rank. I'm a broken man. The person you see on screen right now is not the same person you saw last time. I finally broke. You see, one of the things that defines this show is that I actually play and complete every game before I rank it. No matter how long the games are, no matter how good or how bad, I play them to completion. This game, however, it was a struggle like none I've ever faced before. I needed to take constant breaks just to take my mind off of it. Alright, let's talk about Ninja Council 3. Ninja Council is a beat 'em up. Previously, it had side-scrolling levels with platforming and puzzles. The first game was bad, but it showed some promise. The second game was somehow worse. So let's see what they did with the third one now that's on a new console, the Nintendo DS. First, they gave us a bunch of characters. You unlock them as you play. The problem is they all play the same. Everyone has a 3-hit combo. You can sprint and jump around, and then each character has their jutsu, and regardless of which character you take into battle, you can always take other characters' jutsu and sort of use them as assists on your own mission. Not that it matters because all jutsu are also the same. The ones in blue hit full screen and take the biggest amount of chakra, and the other ones your character will just run at the opponent and tackle them. I'm serious, the Rasengan is just Naruto running at the opponent and tackling them. That is if you're fighting common thugs. If you're fighting a boss, it will actually trigger a cutscene. And the cutscene comes with its own minigame. This is the Nintendo DS after all, so they had to use the touchscreen, right? So you activate the jutsu by tapping the touchscreen, and then you play a minigame where you usually have to match the symbols to perform the jutsu, and then you either blow into the microphone or you swipe the screen in the direction that you want. It gets old, it gets repetitive, the animations are pretty long too. The one that I found kinda neat was Neji's Byakugan, because since you kinda gotta poke the chakra points, and that kinda feels like Neji. But it's weird because the game also wants you to use the stylus a lot, so you gotta do some gymnastics. The levels can be found on this bingo board. You start with only the D rank missions, which are something like kill 20 enemies, or find 20 scrolls, or defeat a boss with a specific jutsu. There's really no story or link between these missions. It's like the filler missions you'd find in most Naruto games, only here it's actually the main content. And sometimes that's fine for a handheld game, except this game also handles like garbage. Something about your range, your momentum, it just feels super off, and if other characters touch you, you get knocked down immediately. And a lot of these missions are on a timer, which means getting knocked down is actually a big downside. And since every character plays the same, this also means that no matter the boss fight, it's all kind of the same too. And the AI is so busted. Look at Tenten during this mission. She's stuck because she can't get past the box. My god, this mission was infuriating. You have to defeat Tenten with Byakugan. That's the whole mission. Problem is, Tenten randomly starts jumping around, running away from you, and then ends up getting killed by a random environmental hazard. Mission failed. Time to start over. And if this wasn't a condition to win a mission, because some boss fights don't require you to beat them with a specific jutsu, one of the best strategies you have is just to stay away, wait for chakra to regenerate, and then hit them with ultimate attacks, because they hit full screen, and sometimes that's actually the right thing to do. Yay. Fun gameplay. As you clear the lower level missions, you unlock higher level missions. Does the AI get harder? Do they get better, more challenging? Not really. They just add a bunch of BS to the stage. For instance, here's a Sasuke boss fight. Instead of making Sasuke stronger, they added a bunch of mobs and objects flying across the stage. Yeah, that will ramp up the difficulty. You know what? They're not wrong. It does get harder, but that's just not fun. You may have also noticed at this point that these levels are no longer side-scrollers. Every level is a big square. You can tell because of the big square on the bottom screen. It shows you your position relative to the enemy boss, when there is an enemy boss. Because when there isn't, this screen is useless. Jeez, at least put a map on there. And outside of boss fights, what do? You fight Naruto's most iconic enemies. The snakes and the spiders. You guys remember the Naruto spider and snake arc? That was a good one. And the whole mission design is so freaking bad. There's so much just left to chance. First of all, it's not hard, but like I said, it handles like ass. Enemy height can make it awkward to hit them with attacks. This sand level has these slopes that affect you but not your enemies for some reason. And if your mission is, for instance, to kill 20 enemies but you knock them off stage, that doesn't count as a kill. So very often what you're actually trying to do is save your enemies from falling, because if they do, that's one less kill that you get within the time limit. There's so much wrong with this level and mission design. And also the enemies are not on the map when you first spawn in. They kind of spawn at random. You know, just to add a little bit more randomness to each mission. Do you want more BS missions? Here's one where you have to collect scrolls. Where are the scrolls, you ask? Well, they randomly drop out of these boxes that you can break and out of enemies you can defeat. So if you get unlucky with the drops, you know what that means. Time to retry. And since all the characters play the same, there's very little motivating the player to just keep playing, because it feels like there's no progression. I mean, I unlocked a gallery and I can't even open the gallery. What the hell? You have to rank up to Jonin to see a gallery? That's kind of ridiculous. It took me over 1 hour to clear the D rank missions. This unlocked the C rank missions, which stay the same. And I was halfway through the B rank missions, which still haven't changed, by the way, when I started asking myself, what the am I doing? So I went to YouTube because I wanted to see if the game got good at some point, and I discovered that the S rank missions are still the same missions, which means that for the first time ever, I'm not finishing this game. I'm done. I'm still gonna rank the out of it though. Here are the cons: bad level design, bad mission design, handles like and the characters all play the same. As for the pros, I kinda like the character sprites, to be honest. Yeah, good sprite work. Worst Naruto game I have ever played. That's the ranking. I didn't think Ninja Council was gonna keep getting worse, especially after the first one. I saw potential. This is not the path I thought they were gonna take, but here we are. I'll see you guys in a minute. I've been playing this other game in parallel because sometimes I needed to take breaks from Ninja Council 3, so I'm gonna finish it right now, and I'll be back to tell you all about the Naruto RPG, Path of a Ninja. Well, that was a journey, and you may have caught some of it because I streamed it on Twitch, twitch.tv/Globku. Give me a follow to find out what's coming up in the next episode. As soon as I booted up Path of the Ninja, I thought, oh no, here we go again. We're fighting them snakes! But actually this game was very, very surprising. I did not expect to like it as much as I did. It's an RPG with quite a few systems, and it's kind of heavy at the start, trying to teach you all of it at the same time, but it kind of boils down to this. When you enter combat, your enemies and your team can move in a 3x4 grid. If you are in the front row, closer to your enemies, you will deal more damage, but you also take more damage. If you want to move to the back, you'll take less damage, but also deal less damage. This, however, does not apply to jutsu, so you can stand in the back and just throw jutsu without the damage penalty. But let's just say jutsu in this game aren't quite as overpowered as they usually are in Naruto games. In fact, more often than not, jutsu are only worth using if you hit multiple enemies with it. To launch the big jutsu, you usually play a minigame on the touchpad. Sometimes you have to swipe the screen, other times you have to input a button combination, and it actually lets you just mash the buttons if you don't want to mess around with a touchscreen at all. Which makes sense, since this game was originally released for the Game Boy Advance in Japan. There's a whole system with elemental strengths and weaknesses too, which includes weaknesses to genjutsu, and it helps knowing what your enemies are weak to. Unfortunately, there's no scan ability or anything of the sort, you just have to guess it via trial and error. Also, because elements matter in this game, they just gave lightning and fire jutsu to everyone. Doesn't matter if they never did it in the show. Here's some elemental jutsu, you're gonna need it. But thanks to these simple systems, during longer encounters it will be very engaging, just moving characters back and forth, putting them in the optimal position to deal the most damage or to receive the least amount of damage. All of that while keeping in mind that the formations your characters have relative to each other actually give you buffs. There is a big downside, which is I wish you could see your opponent's health. death. You just never know if they're 1 hit away from dying or 20 hits away from dying, which means that if you fail the encounter, it can be really discouraging because you never know how close you were to actually beating it. Overall, there are some very cool ideas in this turn-based combat system, turning Naruto mechanics into an RPG, and they're more thoughtful than you think for a game that looks like it was made on RPG Maker. For the most part, you play as Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. These characters join and leave the party as the story requires, with a few more characters showing up later in the game, but without as big of a role in the story. They're almost just guest characters. And you play through the actual Naruto story, starting with the Kakashi training all the way to the end of the Chunin exam arc, with Gaara being the final boss fight. It does have some filler in the middle though, it wouldn't be Naruto without it, right? You know how after the Kakashi training in the anime they have a little montage of them doing some boring missions like rescuing a cat? Well, instead of watching the little montage, you actually play through those missions. They're kind of funny though. The writing in this game is really good. The tutorials constantly break the fourth wall. Naruto gets slapped right as he accepts his first mission as a ninja. That's child abuse, right? The writing definitely carries some of this filler. The gameplay during these missions though, it is usually pretty boring. They're mostly fetch quests. But while playing through the canon quests, I was surprised with how much detail they crammed in there. There were several moments and dialogue lines that I had completely forgotten from the show because they are not major moments, but this game has it all in there. It also gives you a good sense of space, letting you explore areas surrounding Konoha as well as the Land of the Waves. There's an overworld to travel between those different areas, and they have a different look to them, a different vibe. Not all of them are fun though. I just totally hated going through the Forest of Death. And then there's a side quest that puts you back in the Forest of Death. Never again. The game only has 4 directions while exploring, so these diagonal paths are an absolute pain. Over time, you also gain new abilities to explore, which lets you unlock extra chests in the world, like climbing hills, smashing rocks, or walking on water. But its outdated design did get in the way quite often. First of all, it's got a ton of random encounters. And exploring some areas was already frustrating because there's only 4 directions. You add the constant interruption of random encounters and it gets really annoying. These areas are often mazes too, and the game doesn't tell you where to go, you just have to find the path yourself. And actually it's not that hard to find it, but sometimes you want to explore and find more chests with gear and items, but the random encounters really made me wish I didn't do that sometimes. Between fights you can also heal your characters by going into the menu and selecting the heal ability. This was a lot of button presses for something you actually do very often. But the worst of all is if you die, you go back to your last save. There's no checkpoints. In fact, when you die, the game reboots itself. That's how badly you die.
Naruto, Path of the Ninja!
No autosaves! I'm back at the start of the stream! Fortunately, you can save anywhere you'd like as long as you're not in the middle of dialogue or in the middle of combat, so you just need to constantly remind yourself to do it. But in 2020, I think my brain has forgotten to do that. Oh my god, I lost so much progress. Overall, these were a pleasant 11 hours before I saw credits, and I feel like I've said this before and have been very disappointed, but here it goes again. I can't wait to see where the series is going next, because there's actually a Path of the Ninja 2, and I like this one quite a bit. I want to see it evolve, but now it is time to rank it. Despite my positivity during this video, it is somewhat limited when compared to these other games. It's gonna be hard to find a killer DS game that defeats most of these, but I would say that I like this about as much as I did Uzumaki Chronicles. So we're gonna put it at D rank, right above Uzumaki Chronicles, since in this one, you can't just spam Rasengan to win. Oh wait, I mean Power Strike. You can't spam Power Strike. Much like the Ultimate Ninja had a handheld version with Heroes, Clash of Ninja also had its handheld series called Ninja Destiny. But today we're also going to look at a sequel, and I've been looking forward to this one. Clash of Ninja Revolution 2. You see, Clash of Ninja Revolution was basically a port of the Japanese Gekitou Ninja Taisen 3. But Gekitou Ninja Taisen 4, that's a fan favorite. Considered by many, still today, the best Naruto fighting game of all time. So this must be what we're going to play with Clash of Ninja Revolution 2, right? Wrong. It's a completely different game. Ninja Destiny came out around the same time as Ultimate Ninja 3 did here in the West, which is currently one of the best Naruto games of all time, according to our rankings. That said, it's an unfair comparison, considering that this came out on the Nintendo DS and not one of the big boy consoles. And the highest handheld ranking we have so far is Path of the Ninja, which was alright. So what does this portable Clash of Ninja look like? It looks like something that's not great. Literally, it does not look great. They went for the same graphical style as their GameCube games, which is really not the best fit for the Nintendo DS. But looks are only a part of the equation. What really matters is how the game plays. As you would expect, it's a fighting game, albeit with a bit less mechanics than Clash of Ninja. You can call it a Clash of Ninja Light. You have 2 buttons for combos with a weak and a strong attack, and characters still have relatively unique movesets. So there's some stuff to be discovered every time you pick up someone new. Much like Clash of Ninja, you can use half a bar to substitute out of a combo, you can use the full bar to unleash an ultimate, and this time you can also use a quarter of a bar to teleport behind your opponent's back, as long as you're not getting hit, which is interesting. Thing is, you generate chakra so fast in this game, it's not even funny. I mean, you even generate a ton of it while the opponent is blocking your attacks, meaning with a teleport you can just keep a block string going forever if you want to. Ultimates also deal insane amounts of damage. If you thought Clash of Ninja had ridiculous ultimate damage, you haven't seen this one yet. And yes, ultimates are still unblockable in this version of the game, which means that if you time it correctly, given that you have less wake up options in this one, there's nothing the opponents can do on wake up, it's just guaranteed damage. In addition to all of that, because this is a DS game, they had to make use of the touchscreen. It's in the contract. And what they decided to do was add a bunch of random items every fight for you to use. These items can recover health, your chakra, or do some crazier stuff like giving you super armor, disabling your opponent's jutsu, or giving you 100% damage reduction. Insanely powerful stuff that only you have access to. Your CPU opponents won't be using this at all. There's some depth to be discovered with each character since they are all relatively unique, but as a fighting game, it's probably even more broken than the first Clash of Ninja. Characters' hitboxes still hit opponents that subbed out and got behind them. Some characters can just keep mashing forever because all of their moves are plus on block. It's really not that great as a fighting game, but neither is Ultimate Ninja 3 in my opinion. It's more of a party game, and it's one of the best on our list because of how good the content is. So how good is the content in Ninja Destiny? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's a story mode that starts on the final phase of the Chunin exam with Naruto vs Neji and goes until the end of the Tsunade arc. The story itself is told with text and very poor cutscenes, and it's just a series of fights with nothing unique to them. There's no voice acting, which I guess is to be expected from a DS game, but it's really not a good story mode since it's just fights. Oh, and you cannot quit in the middle of story mode because it doesn't save your progress. I learned this the hard way after playing it for 20 minutes. And guess what? Story mode was only 30 minutes long, so hooray for me. You can get it done a lot faster though if you skip the cutscenes, so within 15 minutes after starting over, I was seeing credits. Then you have battle mode, where you can just play against the CPU or play single player, which is kind of like an arcade mode. You pick a character and go through a series of fights against 8 random opponents. No cutscenes, no anything, just fight after fight after fight, and when you're done, you get the credit screen. This is how you unlock new characters. You beat battle mode with pretty much every character in the roster, which means playing through this series of 8 opponents 16 times. And also, if you really want every character, you gotta beat story mode on hard, so you gotta play story mode twice. After you have every character, I guess you can take them into wireless multiplayer, if you can find someone else with this game on a Nintendo DS. It's a pain in the butt, not especially fun, but did I do it? Yeah, I'm not happy about it, but anything for the ranking of Naruto games. Overall, it's a very light version of Clash of Ninja with somehow even less content than the first Clash of Ninja game. It's just fight after fight after fight. I think this is a bad game. We're gonna rank it at E. And below Ultimate Ninja Heroes, that had some cool team animations at least. But we're not done. We'll be right back with a highlight of today's video, Clash of Ninja Revolution 2. I don't know whether I should be laughing or crying. What the hell is this game? Let's jump into it. Clash of Ninja Revolution 2 plays very similar to Clash of Ninja Revolution. They even kept the stage transitions where you need to guess which button your opponent pressed, and they also kept the obstacles on stage, which are just a pain in the butt. However, there are a couple of nice new things too. For instance, you can now substitute without attacking your opponent, making substitutions a bit safer. It removes the wonkiness of some situations where you would substitute and still get hit by an attack. Also, guard breaks are a lot more common now. Technically, guard breaks were already present in Clash of Ninja Revolution, but they're a lot more noticeable now, with some characters even specializing in guard breaks. And when you do get a guard break, your opponent loses a bunch of chakra, so it's a cool mechanic that you need to pay attention to on top of everything else. Other than that, we saw a roster increase as well as an updated moveset for every returning character. Not all of them changed drastically, but they all received adjustments. This time, the game takes place after the end of the original Naruto series, so they finally featured Curse Mark Sasuke and Ultimate QB Mode Naruto, as well as a bunch of original characters. You see, this game's story mode does not follow the Naruto story at all. It is completely original, the whole thing is filler, except for this guy's arm. This guy's arm is canon. At some point during story mode, it started to feel a little bit like pick your Anbu waifu fantasy. Or maybe that was just me. I'm actually a big fan of the new original characters. I love their design, and even gameplay-wise, they came up with some unique gimmicks for every single one of them. And story mode has received a huge revamp. This time, instead of just having character portraits talking to each other visual novel style, you actually have cutscenes with 3D models. The story itself, though, is kinda terrible. Hard to stay committed to any of it. Right from the get-go, a lot of Konoha ninja were affected by a genjutsu, and they come up with the most ridiculous reasons for characters to fight each other.
If I defeat you, I can eat all the meat I could ever dream of.
Gameplay-wise, Clash of Ninja Revolution 2 keeps story mode pretty fun too, making good use of all of its systems. It's not just a one-on-one battle, there are team battles, there are 3v1 battles, there are battles where you have to defeat a bunch of filler characters. It keeps it interesting, which takes me to a new game mode that they added. There's a 2v2 game mode where you can tag characters on the fly. These characters do not have assists, but the way you tag them in is very interesting. You can tag them in mid-combo to extend combos in a way that wouldn't be possible with a single character. You can tag them while getting hit, kind of using a risky substitution because the character will just take your place and most likely will not escape the combo, but hey, at least you saved the main character's health bar. You can switch in neutral, you can also switch on block, and every time you switch characters, it costs you chakras, so it's not free, it's a resource that you have to manage. To complement this, they also added team ultimates when both you and your character on standby have full chakra. Most team ultimates are the same, just a generic animation of characters punching, but some are actually original and unique animations. And finally, if you do one of those stage transitions after your opponent has already lost a character, both of your characters will gang up on the last remaining character, putting them in a 2v1 situation. It's kinda nuts, it makes it really hard to come back, but it's also kinda funny. So far, this game doesn't sound too bad, right? It's like a Clash of Ninja Revolution with a few tweaks to the gameplay that made it slightly better. The new 2v2 game mode is also a big plus for me, and the story mode, albeit uninteresting, it's got cutscenes now. But all of this came at a huge cost. They removed online. That's right, they took out online matches from this Naruto fighting game because they needed more time to work on the story. That's what they said themselves. And I get it, cutscenes are a lot of work, but you don't remove online matches from your fighting game. You just don't do that. Nowadays, we can use Parsec, so it's not as big of an issue, but dude, that's just not worth the trade-off. What were they thinking? To make up for this, they added a bunch of single-player modes, but they're mostly just a series of fights without anything particularly interesting to them. And this is actually how you unlock more characters, which is still a better method than the old store they had, but it's just not an interesting thing to do, I guess. And balance-wise, yeah, it's still not perfect. The awakened characters are obviously a problem because they always have to be. Same for Itachi, he's too powerful in the show not to be broken. But get this one, for instance, they gave Choji a command grab. This is unblockable. This travels really far. This tracks you extremely well. This move has armor, so you can't even poke him to interrupt it. And yes, it does catch jumping opponents. What do you do against this? In conclusion, it's very similar in terms of roster balance to Clash of Ninja Revolution, but given that the roster is much bigger, that's actually impressive. I wouldn't say story mode is better, even though it's got voice cutscenes now, because the story itself really sucks. So to me, that's not a good reason to cut off the online, but I'll say that I'm actually a big fan of the new tag game mode. It's not perfect, but like everything else in Clash of Ninja, it's almost good. I can't rank this too far from the previous game, it's mostly on the same level. I'm gonna place it right above Clash of Ninja Revolution. But I'll say that if I was reviewing this when it came out without online matches, it would have been a lot lower. Thankfully, we have ways to play it online nowadays. I actually ranked the first Path of Ninja somewhat recently, and I was expecting a big dumpster fire out of that game, but turns out it was a decent retro RPG. Of course, it being a retro RPG meant it being full of outdated mechanics, and yes, it does look like it was made in RPG Maker, but still, better than expected. D rank. Now, was Path of the Ninja 2 any better? Short answer, yes. They improved on a lot of stuff, and then they dropped the ball on some really basic stuff too. At first, it looks very similar to the first game. It's the same engine, same sprites, but don't let this first impression fool you. They did a lot of work to make it look better overall. First of all, the top screen has a lot more information. It's a lot easier to understand the buffs you're getting from your position on the grid, the buffs you're receiving from your team formation, as well as the buffs and debuffs applied during battle. On top of that, utilizing a couple of visual tricks, the game has become somewhat more cinematic. With critical attacks zooming in on characters, you have camera pans for bigger jutsu jutsu, it just feels a lot more dynamic overall. Gameplay-wise, they added a few systems that give you a lot more options in combat. You have way more playable characters, which makes choosing your team something you need to consider based on each character's strengths and weaknesses. You can also choose a team leader, and each character will have different benefits to choosing them as your team leader. Also, you can now take 4 characters into battle. 3 of them are active, but at any point you can swap to the character on the bench. And now you also have summons, which replace your entire team with a summoned creature. So far so good, massive improvements over the first game, but it's not all good news. When you die, you still go back to your last manual save, and previously you could save anywhere if you felt like it. Now you can only save at restore points, which is fair, but it can also mean losing a lot of progress if something goes wrong. Also, not seeing your opponent's health, especially in boss fights, is super annoying. You never know if you're 2 hits or 2 hours away from killing them. There's also a big chance that you'll miss attacks that apply status effects on bosses, and you just don't know if they're gonna work or not until you do it. And if you waste a couple of turns on a boss fight, you can say goodbye to your team in a lot of encounters. And if that happens, you're going back to your last save, which is frustrating, especially when you go through a quick time event to execute a jutsu only to see it miss completely. Some characters' specialty is applying these debuffs, which makes it a game of chance when you take them into a boss battle. You never know if they're gonna be effective or not. And of course, it's still an old school RPG, which means you're gonna run into a lot of random encounters, but that's just the genre, I guess. Still, as far as combat goes, I think it did a lot better than the first Path of the Ninja, even if it still has a few quirks that it needed to work out. Next, let's talk about exploration. There are a few areas to explore with different themes, different enemies, different vibes, and exploring in these kinds of games is usually annoying to me precisely because of all the random encounters. And now it's even more annoying because of the new summoning jutsu system. You see, summons aren't just used in combat, they're also used in exploration. How, you ask? Well, terribly, I answer. In the first game, you learned how to break rocks, how to climb hills, how to walk on water, so you could get new chests and keep exploring the same areas but getting new stuff. As soon as you learned those things, you could just do it. You could just walk up to a place and press a button. Here, the summons are gonna take care of all of it. So after you get a summon that can walk on water, you can do it. You just have to summon it first. When you get the summon that can climb hills, you can do it. You just have to summon it first, which means when there are different obstacles ahead of you, you have to fiddle with menus just to get past them. Something that in the previous game was just a button press is now a bunch of menus to summon a creature, clear an obstacle only to summon another creature. It's so cumbersome. They've also added this little mini game to travel across different areas, which is the side scroller where you try to get as many scrolls as you can while avoiding some obstacles. It's fairly basic, but it adds variety to the gameplay, so I really like it. Story-wise, this time you don't play through the Naruto story. Instead, it's filler. I really think this was another step backwards because I really appreciated the detail in the first game's story. There were so many minor moments that I had completely forgotten about, but Path of the Ninja went deep into that Naruto story. And I don't necessarily have anything against filler stories in Naruto games, but the plot is basically there's an evil beast that corrupts those around them, and you gotta find 5 mirrors to seal the beast while some filler villains try to revive it because they want power. It's just a basic boring plot, and it plays out as predictably as you'd think. And the final boss, that was some BS. Oh, I did not have a good time with this one. For instance, check this out. It is Sakura's turn, and for my turn, I am going to buff my entire team's defense with the Hidden Leaf Shield. And now it's the boss's turn. He's gonna hit my entire team with the Evil Energy, which doesn't deal damage, but look at those debuffs. Oh no, oh no, oh that's very bad. And one of those debuffs is Confusion, so Naruto is depressed for some reason. He's not gonna play. He's gonna hit us with a big attack that hits everyone, and now Sakura's paralyzed. Kiva's also depressed, so I just don't get to play. Double Destruction Mouth, please don't. Boss just healed himself, killed my entire team. In comes Hinata from the bench, and of course the boss is going to throw his ultimate attack. My team was looking healthy before this turn. And the worst part is, that boss could have been one hit away from dying, and maybe I could have killed him with Sakura instead of buffing my team's defense, but there's no way of me knowing that, because the boss's health can't be found anywhere. After the game is done, there's still some side content to complete. Oh, before I forget, the credits music. It's decent. Anyway, after the credits, there's some side content, some combat challenges where you fight against preset teams. The game also gives you an Anbu character that you can name and level up, and then you can play with other players via DS Wi-Fi. Now, as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to play this game on DS Wi-Fi nowadays. So I can't really judge how good it actually was, but I've done some research, reading some forum threads and watching some videos, and it's pretty much what you'd expect. You take your team and fight against your opponent's team. A common complaint I saw is that you need to grind your characters to around level 80 or 90 to be able able to compete, and you finish the game at around level 55, so that's a lot of grinding. And that's usually why I dislike RPGs with versus modes. It just feels like the winner is always the player with the most XP, the player who grinded the hardest, no matter how good or how clever you are. But that's just me. Overall, I do think it's a massive improvement over the first game with a few clear downsides, those being the story, the annoyance of summoning creatures in exploration, and the outdated RPG design still persists. And it's not outdated because the game is old, it was already outdated back when the game came out. But given the battle system, the visual effects, and the content improvements, I think we're gonna rank this higher than the previous Path of the Ninja. In fact, we're gonna rank it right above Path of the Ninja. I don't think the sequel improves enough to overtake Uzumaki Chronicles 2. Let's not forget that game had the Master Puppet. And I'll be right back with our next Naruto game. Hi! We're looking at another filler story, so I guess this is the filler episode. After all, it wouldn't be a Naruto show without filler. Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2: The Phantom Fortress. I streamed a decent chunk of this one over on Twitch, so you might have caught it. If you want to watch me play some more Naruto games for this series, give me a follow. The link is down below. It's the story of a castle that shows up in Konoha and starts draining the energy of everyone around it. So Naruto and friends need to climb the castle floor by floor. They find a princess that's moving the castle and she's gone evil and makes you fight spirits of their friends and enemies. And why is she gone evil and is draining everyone's energy? Well, I'm not gonna spoil that. The story is somewhat decent and you can see it for yourself if you want to find out. The whole thing is voiced from start to finish in both Japanese and English. And most of the story is told through these visual novel type cutscenes with the occasional screenshots, but it does also have some really good CG cutscenes, incredibly good looking for a PSP game. Obviously the graphics look outdated nowadays, but the action, the camera work, that stuff is timeless. And it really shows that CyberConnect 2 have been the kings of anime game cutscenes for a really long time. Gameplay wise, at its core, it's an Ultimate Ninja game, which has all the upsides and downsides that we talked about in previous episodes. It's an easy to pick up 2D party style game, usually with big rosters, but also it's a mashy battle system. It's a substitution festival at higher difficulties, which makes the fights a bit boring in my opinion. But in story mode, they did switch things up, so it wouldn't just be a series of fights. The castle has different floors, and to reach the stairs to get to the next floor, you need to fill in rooms with these scrolls, and each scroll is a different type of minigame. And just so you understand this game perfectly, we're gonna take you through all the scroll types right now. First, you have the random battles, which is just a 1v1 battle. Then you have clone class, where you have to keep track of the real Erisu. The amusement room, where you gamble for points. The riddle room, where Iruka asks you questions about the show. And the tree climbing minigame, as well as the shadow mimic minigame from Ultimate Ninja 2. You also get new characters as you progress, so you can switch it up whenever you go into one of the battle rooms. But each character also has a unique ability to explore the castle itself. Some find hidden paths, destroy rubble blocking your way, or have abilities that change the random scrolls that you get. So far, it all sounds good. It's a really good concept, the execution sucks. This game is the definition of outstaying its welcome. 30 minutes after starting this game, I had already seen all the scroll types, and even worse, I was already getting duplicate questions from Iruka and duplicate patterns from the shadow minigame. 30 minutes in, this game stopped giving me anything new. And the minigames were fun, but they're still minigames. They're not gonna carry the 5 hours that are required to complete the story mode. And the story itself also suffers from this, because it feels stretched. It's a game with 30 minutes of content that tries to stretch it for 10 hours. Yeah, you heard it right, 10 hours. I said story mode was only 5 hours long, but after you beat story mode, you unlock a second story mode. This time you play as Jiraiya, you go through the same story, but from his perspective. Second story mode only takes you about 3 hours, but you don't really unlock any characters as you progress, which means you can't even change it up when going into the different battle rooms. And there's also no tree climbing or shadow mimic mini games because you don't have Naruto or Shikamaru in your party. Iruka does have new questions, so there's that at least. And then the rest of your time can be spent in Heroes mode, where you select a team of 2 or 3 characters and fight against other teams. It's fun discovering the secret teams because if you pick a team that has a common theme, it actually gives you a bonus and it gives you a skill that you can use before the battle. This might sound very familiar to you because this is exactly what Ultimate Ninja Heroes was. You know, the first game, we reviewed it a couple of episodes back. Funny story about that, Heroes 2 was actually the first Heroes game in Japan. It was called Ultimate Ninja Heroes Portable Castle or something. The first Ultimate Ninja Heroes that came out in the West, the one we reviewed a couple of episodes back, never came out in Japan. Why? Oh, I'll tell you why. They took this castle game we reviewed today, removed the entire castle story, and just released it. They released a single game mode in this game we reviewed today as its own full game. And then then after that, they had the audacity of releasing Phantom Fortress as a sequel, as if the other game was okay. This would never fly nowadays. Overall, I kinda liked it. The game has good ideas, but also terrible execution. It's a game that outstayed its welcome and everything suffers because of it. The story feels stretched, and the castle gameplay gets boring even if it was interesting at first. That said, with that story mode and the castle game mode and all of that, it's already gonna be a full rank above the first game. I'm gonna put it at D rank, right above Clash of Ninja, but below Uzumaki Chronicles. And those three games right there all have great ideas and terrible execution. And I'll be damned if that doesn't sum up perfectly what Naruto games are. Naruto Ninja Council 2 European version. But Globku, didn't you already rank Ninja Council 2? Yes, I did, but not the European version, which is a completely different game. In fact, this game in Japan was called Ninja Council 3. And the Ninja Council 3 that we reviewed last time in Japan was Ninja Council 4. You know, because Ninja Council is garbage. So might as well make the naming as confusing as possible. Though to be fair, this is probably the best Ninja Council I've played up to date. Right off the bat, the starting menu greets us with some 8-bit metal. This game ain't here to mess around. And before you even start, there's an entry that says drawing, where you can graffiti the Hokage faces with a touchpad if you want. You also unlock character pictures to draw on later as you play the game. And it doesn't stop at the starting menu. The soundtrack kept on delivering really good bangers until you reach this level. I mean, it's no Composition 12, but still, Ninja Council needed to have something weird, I guess. But enough about what's happening on the sidelines, let's talk about the game. First up, you choose a main character with 2 supports. All main characters play pretty much the same with a 3-hit combo, jumps, double jumps, sprints, all that stuff, but they do have different jutsu. To unleash a jutsu, first you have to gather chakra with a touchpad, and depending on how fast you rotate it, you may get a different jutsu. I've heard that this game was a real touchpad breaker back in the day. And yeah, these quick time events, or whatever you want to call them, they are not easy. But yeah, Rock Lee, for instance, his level 1 is just a character buff, while his level 3 is a whole attack animation. Your supports can also launch different jutsu by tapping them on the touchscreen, but honestly, nothing beats Might Guy slapping the curse out of Sasuke. That slap, it's just so raw. And this time you don't have just a couple of levels that are recycled and repeated throughout the entire game. Instead, every level is unique and crafted with its own gimmicks and its own unique boss fight at the end. The levels are also relatively open. There's some good verticality and exploration possibilities, though I'd say that this game, if I was to complain about something, is that it's missing some kind of collectible. There's just not a lot of incentive to explore. All you can find are these Konoha marks, which after you get 100, you gain an extra life, which basically means if you die, you can restart from the latest checkpoint instead of having to replay the whole level. It's like if Sonic only had rings as collectibles. That wouldn't really encourage you to explore, you just speed run into the end of the level. What I'm saying is this game is missing some Chaos Emeralds. But yeah, it feels a lot better than previously, and the levels can definitely surprise you once in a while. For instance, when you click this video, did you expect to see Sasuke snowboarding? Because I sure didn't expect that. Or maybe a platforming level where the smoke randomly appears and completely inverts your controls. Sometimes mid-air. Terrifying stuff, really. And then the boss fights. They usually come in 2 phases. You fight them with a touchpad minigame in the middle of a level, and if you succeed when you reach the end of the level and actually fight the boss, they'll have less health than usual. And all of these boss fights are unique. I'd say most of them aren't that big of a deal difficulty-wise, but I did die to Spider-Man more than I care to admit. And then you reach that final boss, and Orochimaru is easily the hardest boss I ever had to fight in a Naruto game. I know you guys are waiting for me to fight Gaara in Clash of Ninja Revolution 3 or whatever, but so far, Ninja Council 2 European version Orochimaru, he just felt unfair. Not only does he deal a ton of damage, Kabuto just randomly comes in whenever he wants and heals Orochimaru. And they're fully invulnerable while this is happening. You cannot interrupt it. I started to think that this boss fight was actually impossible, so I searched for a walkthrough on YouTube and found this guy playing the game, and he quit on this same boss fight. He never beat it. Go read the comment section that's like, oh, this boss made this man delete his YouTube channel. Luckily, I did manage to do it on Twitch, not once, but twice. And if you missed that boss fight and you're curious, there should be a video on the second channel, which is basically just my Twitch highlights. That will probably be the next video we post over there, so go subscribe if you haven't yet. You may have noticed that the Sound 4 are the main enemies in this game, but the story doesn't really follow the last arc. Instead, it's just just something generic like, the Sound 4 are attacking the village, we must protect it, and that's it. It's barely a story. And it's still super annoying that you can't even touch enemies. It's not like they're attacking you or anything, but simply touching the enemy standing still is gonna knock you down, which makes birds my mortal enemy over any of the Sound 4. But overall, definitely my favorite ninja console so far. For the first time, I feel like it improved over the first game, even if it lost some of its secrets and collectibles during each level. It still has some of the usual problems that ninja console games have, but hey, I don't think this is a bad game at all. So we're gonna rank it above all the other ninja console games, and you know what? I'm gonna go even further and place it above Clash of Ninja and Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2. Clash of Ninja is just an incomplete mess, nothing more than a good concept, and Heroes 2, despite being hours long, it's like 30 minutes of a game repeated over and over. I kind of enjoy this, so D rank right below Uzumaki Chronicles. And it's about time a ninja console game got out of that bad game zone. But next up, we're gonna rank Broken Bond, the sequel to what's currently our best Naruto game of all time, Rise of a Ninja. Let's see if this is the first game to break the A rank. I'll be right back. Nope, I can tell you right now that this will not be our first A rank in the ranking of Naruto games. The sequel of Rise of a Ninja does a lot to improve itself. We still got the original soundtrack, the graphics still look good, along with some strong animations and cutscenes. Faces are weird, but other than that, the game still looks good nowadays, and that's really something. They increased the number of characters by a lot, and I mean by a lot. All of them with unique movesets and jutsu, and each jutsu has its own minigame, which means a lot more fan service. I'm a fan, I like to be serviced. Thank you very much. You can still fully explore Konoha. In fact, it's a lot easier to run on water or run up walls since you don't have to gather chakra before doing it. And the area outside Konoha has been increased, so there's even more to explore. But even though the game improved on all of this, I don't think it's a better game than Rise of a Ninja. Let's break it down. The game starts really strong with the epic fight of the third Hokage versus Orochimaru. You play through the different phases of this fight like no other game ever gave you the chance to. And this is just a tutorial. You also get to experience the aftermath from Naruto's perspective. A desaturated Konoha serving as the backdrop as a depressed Naruto attends the third Hokage's funeral. It's a beautiful opening that does everything that Rise of a Ninja did even better, which is highlighting the unique battle moments of the story as well as give player control during these emotional times that aren't necessarily tied to fighting. And no other game in this entire ranking has managed to pull off these moments so well. And then straight to filler. Filler isn't new to this series. Rise of a Ninja had its fair share, but it is so much worse in Broken Bond. There's a lot more of it, and without fail, it's always boring. It's always fighting bandits, it's fetch quests, it's revisiting areas you've been to before, it's solving the same puzzles you've solved before, and the stories are generic and uninteresting. Towards the end, I would even ignore coins just because between me and the coin, there would be a bandit. That's how sick of it I was. Not all of it is terrible though. This time you don't just play as Naruto. They've made several characters playable in story mode, not just in combat, but exploration as well. First of all, when you're in a party, you can freely switch between members and order them to follow you or stay put, which can be used to solve puzzles where you need different characters to stand on different platforms. And each of them also has their unique skills to solve puzzles and grab collectibles. For instance, Akamaru can crawl into tight spaces. Shikamaru can navigate his shadow to access switches out of reach. It's how the game gates some of your progress. You can only get past certain parts once you unlock the right character. However, even though it's cool that you get more characters with unique abilities to explore, the game kinda had no idea what to do with them. For instance, there are these rocks that block your path. Some of them can be destroyed with a Rasengan, others can be destroyed with a Chidori. But then they make Choji playable, and what do? Well, I guess we could spread a bunch of boxes in Konoha for Choji to break with Human Boulder, and then I guess he can also break some rocks. At the end of the day, it just feels like even though we have more characters, we don't have more variety. The missions are even more repetitive than previously. They're so uninspired. And as a whole, I think the Broken Bond experience is a lot worse than my Rise of a Ninja experience. Movement is still weird for platforming, same as Rise of a Ninja really. The momentum feels off, like there's a big wind up to reach top speed, but as soon as you hit the jump button, the character is suddenly flying. Makes a lot of the platforming sections feel bad. But like I said, not everything is worse. There are a ton of minigames this time around to varying degrees of fun, especially in Tanzaku Town. You've got the shuriken minigames, aiming, fishing, etc. And the real story missions are still really cool. It wasn't just the funeral scene that we talked about earlier. Every time this game goes back to canon, it's still some of the best retelling of the Naruto story I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot. Here's a great example. When Itachi uses the Tsukuyomi on Sasuke, you get to navigate this confusing maze and relive Sasuke's worst memories. It puts you in the shoes of Sasuke going through that terrible experience, something the anime didn't really do. You know he's going through something, you see his memories popping back up, but to actually get your hands on the character in that moment and and kind of play through that experience, that's something special. And even the smaller moments, like there are some mini games to learning the Rasengan. And these unique gameplay moments crafted specifically to enhance each moment of the story were exactly what made Rise of a Ninja so great, and where Broken Bond still excels. There are no original anime cutscenes anymore, unfortunately. It's all in-engine cutscenes with quick time events, which is a downgrade in my opinion, but still, these story missions are awesome. The main problem with Rise of a Ninja was its combat. It was just not great for multiplayer, and this is where Broken Bond improved the most, in my opinion. If I was to rank Rise of a Ninja story and multiplayer separately, I would give the story an A rank and the multiplayer a D, maybe even worse. Broken Bond's story may have fallen to a B rank, but the combat in multiplayer has definitely risen. No longer can you mash substitution to get out of a combo. It's now a timed button press. You can still do it mid-combo. It's really not that expensive on Chakra, which still makes this combat system a substitution festival at higher levels where people have figured out the timing, but it's much better for sure. A lot of the hitbox issues were fixed, and that's impressive given the roster is much bigger now, though in my opinion, a lot of the basic problems still persist. Each character has a long list of combos that barely matter. You have to learn them, but you'll rarely pull off a full combo if you're playing someone with experience. That's because most combos aren't true. You can just block in the middle of a string. And for strong finishers, even if you get hit by the rest of the combo, you can usually just sidestep them and punish your opponent for whiffing the finisher. Which means finishing combos is usually a bad idea. It's so counterintuitive. And then there's the jutsu minigames, which I think they're awesome for story mode, but in a multiplayer setting, I'm not the biggest fan. The servers for this game aren't online anymore. I couldn't test the netcode or anything like that, and it's hard to say if this is exactly how it all went, but that's what I was able to gather from taking this game into practice mode, which sucks, by the way. You cannot set your training dummy to do anything other than just AI difficulty. But yeah, based on that and a lot of YouTube videos of online matches, I think, yeah, it's definitely an improvement over Rise of a Ninja, but it's still not a great combat system. So in conclusion, it's a much worse story experience compared to Rise of a Ninja, despite them giving us a bunch of characters to play with. The filler really just ruins it, and the mission structure, the types, they're all very repetitive unless you're playing the canon story. But it's a much better multiplayer experience. That said, I do think these games have a very heavy focus on the single player, with the multiplayer being a bit of an afterthought. It completes the experience, but it's definitely not the main focus. I kinda struggled to place this game. I knew it was below Rise of a Ninja, but I wasn't sure if I was also gonna put it below Ultimate Ninja 3. But in the end, I think the story in Broken Bond definitely has more to offer. So we're gonna rank it above Ultimate Ninja 3, making it the second best Naruto game of all time. At least for now. Alright. It's time. Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm. From PS2 to PS3, the Ultimate Ninja series was gonna evolve into something else. From a 2D fighting style to a 3D arena fighter that would change anime games forever. The Storm games would later become a staple of the industry, an example to follow, something every anime game out there was trying to be. But it took a while to get there. The first Storm was really rough around the edges, and out of all the Storm games, I think this one is by far the most overhyped by its fanbase. So get ready, I'm about to hate on this game. Taking Naruto games into a 3D arena fighter style was weird, especially since arena fighters weren't that common back then. It took some time to adjust, but it had a lot going for it. It was the best looking arena fighter to date, combos were super flashy, ultimates were cinematic and epic, and it features some fan favorite features that would later be dropped in the series, like jutsu clashes and wall fighting. That said, since they had to develop a brand new fighting system and a brand new engine, that left very little time to work on story mode. The big thing people usually point to is being able to free roam in Konoha, something that wasn't possible in any of the other Storm games. You can walk around, break pots, talk to characters, and who could forget the Naruto canon, just flinging yourself across the village. Thing is, this village is boring as hell. The NPCs mostly give you fetch quests, you get materials to make some ramen, there's just not much to do in this village. And this game came out a full year after Rise of a Ninja. I would even argue that the free roaming in Ultimate Ninja 3 was better than this. It doesn't stop at how little there is to do in Konoha. This whole single player experience really just isn't great. When you think Storm, you think of wonderful cinematic retellings of the Naruto story. Well, that was really not the case in the first Storm game. The story isn't retold, it's more of a mission briefing before you jump into a fight. You read this, accept the mission, fight, and that's it, mission complete. No storytelling, no unique gameplay moments, nothing tailored to retell the Naruto story. You get a cutscene at the start of the game and another one at the end of the game. No cutscene cutscenes in between. Once in a while you get a minigame which adds some variety, but even those are repeated very often. And then you have a few boss fights, and by a few I mean very few, like 3 of them if I recall correctly, and they're kind of the same. Story mode in the first Storm game is extremely bad in my opinion. I mean, they straight up skipped the Zabuza arc. And the thing is, outside of story mode, there's not much else to it. I mean, there's the fighting system and you can play local versus, but online was not a thing. And this was the PlayStation 3, which, you know, doesn't make it unacceptable, but online was becoming the norm, so it was definitely a feature that felt was missing. But if you want to talk about the combat system itself, I mean, I've criticized many games on this list for being mashy. Storm is no exception. You can sub at any time for the cost of a tiny bit of chakra. And the combat system feels a bit clunky to me. I mean, playing it now, it feels like it's missing a lot because of features that were added later on, like air dashing, combo canceling, and a ton of other little details that made it smoother. But I remember playing this when it first came out and feeling like the move to 3D was a mistake, because it just never felt good to me. In conclusion, the first Storm was a beautiful upgrade. The flashy combat would become a staple that would redefine the genre, but they didn't quite find what made it special right away. And because they needed to develop all of this from scratch, that meant story mode was considerably worse than what the Ultimate Ninja series had gotten us used to. This may be the hottest take I've ever taken in the show, but we're gonna place the first Storm game at the bottom of C rank. But don't you worry, the second Storm game fixes a lot of this. But that, folks, will conclude the ranking of Naruto games. We've done it. We've ranked every single Naruto game out there. Only 20 Naruto Shippuden games to go. Welcome to 2021. Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 2. From a game that barely had a story mode to one of the best story modes ever made in a Naruto game. Cutscenes all the way through, fully voiced, unique gameplay systems tailored for the different story moments, incredible boss fights and quick time events. And it's not just the big boss fights either. It may look like you're just fighting Kakashi at the start, but then a quick time event pops that changes the stage, and now Kakashi is using the environment to attack you along with his jutsu. It's really, really good. Every fight has its own little gimmick, and it makes playing through this story so enjoyable. And watching the cutscenes too, I mean, it's CyberConnect. They're still the masters of anime game cutscenes. They recreated so many memorable moments perfectly by combining this style of cutscene with unique gameplay elements. Finding Sasuke, Jiraiya versus Pain, Naruto saving Konoha. I mean, you could skip the anime and just play the story mode, and you would get most of the story and excitement that the show has to offer. That's how good this was. The Konoha free roaming was replaced by this fixed camera angle free roaming, which has its upsides and downsides. The big downside being you didn't have as much freedom of movement, so it didn't feel like you were actually exploring as much as just seeing the village from the angle you were provided. But on the other hand, it made the village feel more alive. NPCs were actually doing stuff instead of just standing in the corner waiting to give you a quest. And it gave them a chance to build more areas outside of Konoha, which gave us a sense of scale in this world, since you would literally walk between villages. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I prefer this way of exploring the world, but if you weigh the upsides and the downsides, I definitely prefer it compared to the first Storm game. Combat also received some improvements. For the first time, the game had online. Now, I never considered the netcode in Storm to be good. It just doesn't handle Wi-Fi or long distance connections very well. Storm 2 arguably had the best netcode of all of them, but it still wasn't great. But the fights themselves feel a lot faster, more fluid. They polished the gameplay a decent chunk, but it's still a substitution festival. Also, they cut the wall fights and jutsu clashes in favor of balance, which fans disliked, but personally, I didn't mind it. Especially since we got online play and a better balance as a result. That's a net positive in my book. And finally, Lars from Tekken is there, so cool. In conclusion, this is one of the best story modes ever made in Naruto, and the combat is improving, albeit very slowly. At the top of our ranking, we have 3 games that are mainly there for the story content. So this will be very easy to compare. Even without the Konoha exploration, I would still consider this story mode to be better than Rise of a Ninja. And if combat wasn't a substitution festival, I'd probably give it an A rank, but instead, it's gonna sit at the top of B for now. And up next, we have a weird sequel that I kinda respect. It's time for Storm Generations. I look back at Generations and consider it to be mostly a battle system overhaul, but an overhaul that came at the cost of the amazing story mode that we had in Storm 2. And coming out of Storm 2, we were hungry to keep playing that story with those amazing visuals, the events, the boss fights, but Generations said, nah, get rid of all of those. The story mode in Generations is split between different characters. You pick a protagonist and play through their story. Each story starts and ends with an original anime cutscene, which, hey, kind of underrated. But throughout each story, there are no in-engine cutscenes cutscenes, no boss fights, no unique gameplay events. It's just fight after fight after fight with slideshows in between, which makes the start and the end of each story really exciting, but the meat in the middle is extremely boring because you're just fighting the AI without any bells and whistles. That said, Generations gave us the best improvements to the battle system. As a whole, the game became a lot smoother and much more responsive with the addition of a lot of new system mechanics. For instance, you could now do a chakra dash from the air. Also, your grounded chakra dash would follow opponents into the air, so you'd have kind of a ground to air chakra dash. You can now combo cancel with a chakra dash as well, which allows you to interrupt your own combos when your opponent subs out of them. So reading substitutions became a part of the game. Or, you know, just to deal more damage, just to deal max punishment. You'd get some combo canceling in there. But the biggest change was perhaps the addition of a substitution bar. With this, subbing out no longer just cost a tiny bit of chakra. Instead, it was a new resource that you needed to manage, turning the mashy combat style that started all the way back in the first Ultima Ninja game into something that you could spend some time mastering, baiting the opponent into using subs, starving them for resources, all while managing your own. From this point forward, I don't consider the Storm battle system to be mashy. Yes, you still perform combos with a single button, but to get good at this game, you need a lot more than combos now. That's something that I'll maybe talk in a separate video, but I just don't agree with people that boil down this entire fighting system to pressing circle. Generations was the game that made that claim false, in my opinion. Now, as a fighting game, I still much prefer the style of a Clash of Ninjas. Storm can be very noisy visually, and the stuff you need to master to get good at the game doesn't always feel fun to do, at least to me personally, but again, that's maybe something that I'll go into more depth in a future video. The lack of a good story mode paired up with a bad netcode makes Generations a very hard sell in my opinion, but the improvements made to the battle system would definitely be felt in its sequels. So it's with great respect that I will rank this below Clash of Ninja Revolution at C rank. Half of the Storm games are done. It's time to move on to the big one. Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 3. The amazing story mode from Storm 2 is back. They're picking up the story right where it left off and continue to tell it in an excellent way with amazing cutscenes, unique gameplay moments, and awesome boss fights. And they keep surprising with every level. There's always some new gimmick that they had never done before, and it really makes these story modes so enjoyable. The exploration is similar to Storm 2 with the fixed camera angles in free roaming, now with even more areas outside of Konoha to explore. And the story goes up to the start of the Great Ninja War, at which point they made up an original ending, so the game would end in a fight of Naruto versus Tobi and all the tail beasts, instead of ending in a cliffhanger, which honestly, I don't hate it for that. Later, the game was released on PC as Storm 3 Full Burst and added yet another story chapter, this time focused on Sasuke and his resurrected brother taking on Sage Mode Kabuto. But no matter if they're telling the canon story or the made-up ending or the extra story in the extra episode, everything, and I mean everything, is top-notch quality just like Storm 2 got us used to. But now, it has the added bonus of using all the improvements that Storm Generations brought to the battle system, and added a few systems of its own on top of it as well. Characters were rebalanced to provide a better multiplayer experience, your supports work a bit different now, some of the combos in Generations were removed but they added team combos, but perhaps the biggest change to the combat system was instant awakenings. Previously, if your character dropped below a certain health threshold, you could charge your chakra and trigger an awakening. Now you can still do that, but for some characters you can also just trigger a minor awakening instantly, which will slowly drain your chakra for as long as it's active, and that just gave us another resource to manage during combat, which on one hand I kinda love, on the other it just always made me pick characters that had that available, which wasn't everyone. I could honestly talk about this game for hours, it really is one of my favorites in this series, but at the end of the day, it just brought the best that the previous games had to offer and mashed it all together into a formula that worked beautifully. Some of this series' old problems still persist, but I think that without a doubt, this is our very first A-rank game in the ranking of Naruto games, making it the absolute best Naruto game of all time, or at least so far. How long will Storm 3 reign at the top? Will the next game take its spot? No, because it's Storm Revolution. Oh my god, what were they thinking? This game was the biggest step back in the series, and you can tell they tried to freshen it up. They tried to make the new stuff work, but man, did they miss the mark. First of all, instead of the story mode that we all love, they split story mode into 3 different things. First up, the Ninja Escapades, which featured new anime, and also some fights in between the anime, just so they could pretend it's still a video game. But really, it's like 90 minutes of new anime, and it's pretty good. You've got the creation of Akatsuki, which is about 40 minutes long, takes you through the recruitment of different Akatsuki members. You've got Itachi and Shisui, that whole relationship, but those only pale in comparison to the 10 minutes short of Itachi frying an egg. The second story mode was the star of the show, the Ninja World Tournament, a brand new mode that puts 4 characters in a free-for-all battle, and instead of taking each other's health bars, they drop orbs when you hit them, and the one with the most orbs when the time runs out wins. I hated this mode. And you can tell they spent a lot of time developing it, but it just wasn't a good idea. If you think storm matches can get confusing, wait until you have 4 characters on stage with stage hazards on top of it. And also, it was an offline only game mode. We were just playing AI. It took so long to beat too. They really believed this was gonna be fun. So that's a big chunk of this game that is just trash. And then the last story mode is the Mecha Naruto story, which, let's be honest, gave birth to the awesome character, Mecha Naruto. But instead of an interesting origin story, it's typical Naruto filler. You can free roam in this mode, but none of the interesting gameplay gimmicks are there. You just go from place to place to talk to different characters. Eventually you fight, and it might be a 1v1 fight, or it might be the tournament mode fight. Honestly, not my idea of fun. But they didn't just take story mode and turn it into something everyone liked less. Oh no, they didn't stop there. They also messed with the combat system, and not in a good way. Team combos from Storm 3, gone. Just don't like them. Just remove them. But the biggest change everyone hated was having to pick your character type. You know how you can throw an ultimate jutsu or go into awakening when you're playing this game? Well, now you gotta choose which one you want, because you can't have both. That's right, when picking a character, you gotta choose if you want to have an ultimate jutsu or a true awakening together with an instant awakening. Or you can also pick the new drive type, which is basically a counter to those two. It seals your chakra bar. Thanks to character types, every character felt incomplete, no matter the option you picked, especially since this is the 5th game of the series. We've been playing with these characters for a while, so picking them in Revolution just feels, you know, something's missing. But they did add 2 things to the combat system that would later carry over to Storm 4, those being counters and the guard break pills. Counter would stun the opponent at the cost of some chakra. No one liked this. It was way too powerful, the punishment was way too big. And guard break pills, well, the guards overall were harder to break in this game, so they gave you the pills that you could only use twice in battle to break a guard. It's a balanced choice. I wasn't really a fan, but I don't think it's terrible. Also, kinda not terrible, but kinda gimmicky are this new super big awakenings, or whatever they're called. There were like 3 characters that would become this huge titanic character with a boss fight kinda like moveset. But controlling them was a bit awkward. It worked well as a gimmick, but I'm glad it didn't make it past this game. What did carry over though was the addition of sidestepping and combo ultimate jutsu. Whenever you had specific teams with the ultimate type, you would get unique animations of those 2 characters coming together and throwing a combo ultimate. Some of them never even showed up in the anime, and that was awesome fan service. It was perhaps the most disappointing in the series, no doubt, and the first game that we saw take a major step back without any major improvements. You know, Generations took the story away, but at least it improved the series as a whole with the changes to the combat system. Revolution kind of feels like the filler episode of the Storm series. I'm still gonna place it above the first Storm game because I really don't think the first Storm plays very well. At least this feels fluid, kind of like Storm 3. But all things must come to an end eventually, and with the end of Naruto also came the end of the Storm series, with their biggest title yet, Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 4. Like all the main Storm games, the amazing cinematic story is back, but this time with a big change. No free roaming. It's a series of levels with amazing cutscenes, gameplay gimmicks, boss fights. Everything that we love is right here. There's just no walking around in between. Instead, the free roaming was taken into a separate game mode called Adventure Mode, and boy does it suck, but more on that later. The main story mode did it once again, but this time it didn't simply retell the events of Naruto, it animated them for the first time. You see, when Storm 4 came out, the anime was still going through the Great Ninja War, and most of what was airing was pure filler. So, Storm 4 was the first one to fully animate the end of Naruto, which to me hit in a really special way. And honestly, I enjoy the ending in the game more than the ending in the anime itself. It tells the story in a way that only a video game could. It makes excellent use of giving you player control, especially in that last fight against Sasuke. Going through all the different battles that these two have fought throughout the generations, seamlessly changing the version of Naruto you're playing, which completely changes your moveset, and perfectly captured not only the action, but the emotional moments too. Storm 4 was the first Naruto game that actually made me cry when credits rolled. I don't know what to say. They captured it. Like, they just nailed it in this game. They captured the essence of the manga perfectly. I can barely speak right now. But after story mode comes adventure mode and straight up ruins my mood, putting me back in that filler territory. Oh my god, I hate this. The story sucks, the gameplay is boring, basically it's a long fetch quest with some fights in between, and the free roaming somehow feels worse than before. It feels more limited, you can't even jump anymore. Take this adventure mode, throw it in the trash. Regarding the battle system though, almost everything that people disliked about Storm Revolution was either tweaked or removed. The counter now blows the opponent away instead of stunning them, so it returns you to neutral rather than give you a big punish. There are no more character types. Your characters can both awaken and ultimate jutsu again. But then, to top it all off, they added team switching. So far, you were only able to pick a main character with 1 or 2 supports, but now your supports were characters that you could switch to in battle. This gave you new ways to combo cancel, new tech, and overall, even though this changed the game significantly, it was a very welcome change. It did break the game a little bit. A ton of characters are usually banned in Storm 4 tournaments, but like I said before, not the biggest fan of Storm when it comes to the competitive side. I never was. So this game being slightly more broken competitively didn't really affect me in a major way. Especially since the netcode is still garbage. They've made 5 online Storm games at this point and still did not fix the netcode. Later an expansion was added in Road to Boruto, which featured the Boruto story from the Boruto movie. They gave it the same treatment they always do, so it was amazing. And with it came new Boruto characters too. The Road to Boruto expansion made adventure mode slightly less painful, but still not great in my opinion. Storm 4 has what I consider to be the best story mode of the series. Even without the free roaming, each mission is unique, it's engaging, it's super fun. The battle system changes were overall very positive. Team switching is a big deal, but I think more than drastically changing the battle system, Storm 4 polished everything that the other games added so far. So there is no doubt in my mind that Storm 4 should rank above Storm 3, making it the new best Naruto game of all time. And as far as I know, it was never surpassed. But like I said, there are a lot of Shippuden games left to rank, and I never played a lot of them either. So I can't say for sure that it will stay on top forever, but this is the current ranking, and Storm 4 rules supreme, at least for now. Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja 4. Much like Ultimate Ninja 3, this game splits story mode into 2 different modes, Master Mode and Hero Mode. Hero Mode features the original Naruto story, but since Ultimate Ninja 4 was the first Naruto game that brought us Shippuden characters and story, we're gonna start with the Master Mode, which is where these can be found. Master Mode expands on the freedom of movement that Ultimate Ninja 3 started, this time dropping Naruto into a much bigger area, giving him new movement options and even platforming sections. I wish the wall climbing of Ultimate Ninja 3 was still there, but other than that, movement is even more satisfying than before, though some of these areas are a bit too big for the amount of stuff they have in them. Right at the start, it's just a huge area with nothing but boxes. And since this game mode is also kind of an RPG, you unlock abilities as you play, meaning that at the start, none of the fun exploration abilities are available yet. Eventually, you do get there, and they use Naruto's abilities really cleverly to create some platforming challenges. Though as fun as they are, the game never trusts that you've learned the controls. Every time you jump, the game's like, hey, triangle to shadow clone? No matter how many hours you are into the story, this message will keep popping up. Now, as you may have guessed, this part of the story is filler. It takes place during Naruto's training with Jiraiya before Naruto returned to Konoha. And no, they never explained the scrolls hanging from Naruto's butt. They look cool, I just have no idea why they're there. The filler story is quite bland. Little girl wants to be a sacrifice to a shadow puppy who's the final boss of this mode, so Naruto slowly uncovers the reasons as to why she wants to be sacrificed and tries to fix everything so everybody can live happily ever after. The story isn't that impressive, but the production quality sure is. CyberConnect 2 does it again. They leveled up once more in the graphics department, in the quality of cutscenes, and it shows right at the start. The sun shines bright in the sky, bathing the leaf forest in sunbeams. Naruto rests in the shade after a long day of training. A frog commits suicide. But the big downside to this mode is definitely the combat. It's a brawler style combat that some could call it the precursor to the Storm series, but oh my god, it's so much worse. You mash circle to pull off combos, sometimes you hit triangle when a prompt appears, and that's pretty much how much depth there is to it. Each time you press circle, Naruto throws multiple attacks, which makes this combat not that snappy when you want to stop attacking a target and change to another target. And you just keep fighting the same enemies over and over again until you reach the boss fight, which despite having some unique mechanics, doesn't really shine in the fun department either. The camera can also get really wild. This also happens during the exploration moments, but especially in combat since Naruto's movement is really fast, and I like the look of it. It's really flashy, but it just doesn't feel good in any way. Now, this whole game mode is about 2.5 hours, so it is a bit short for a story mode. Credits roll, and psych! Here's the real Naruto Shippuden story post-credits. Oh, we've been baited, folks. The credits weren't the end of the game. From this point on, you keep your movement abilities, but you're using them to explore every location between Konoha and the Sand Village, giving the Naruto world a sense of scale and place. There are still a lot of empty areas, but now they're not the goal itself, they're just the path towards the goal. This part of the story doesn't just have you playing through the main story, it also includes a ton of side missions as well. Most of them are fetch quests, but they're generally well written and use the Naruto characters really well, so if you're not skipping dialogue, it can definitely be fun. Now, as you know, Gaara gets captured by the Akatsuki at the start of Shippuden, that's the first Shippuden arc, which is once again represented by top tier cutscenes. CyberConnect 2 never disappoints in that department. And when Naruto is chasing after Gaara, credits. The game ends after the Naruto versus Itachi fight. It's not even a full arc. If I was pleasantly surprised to see that the game continued after the first credits, I was so disappointed to see where it ended afterwards. It feels like they rushed this game out because they wanted to be the first Shippuden game out there. To give you an idea of how rushed this was, Shippuden Sasuke isn't even a part of the roster. Now, despite that, there's a lot of fun to be had in Master Mode, about 15 hours of content I would say if you want to do it all, but thanks to the way it ends, it will always feel like an incomplete game to me, and that's just a huge bummer. But of course, as I mentioned at the start, that's not all there is to it. There's also another story mode called Hero Mode. In Master Mode, you will find these orbs occasionally, and they are used to unlock slideshows, cutscenes, and fights in Hero Mode. This mode goes through the vanilla Naruto story, which makes it super weird that you have to play through Shippuden first to unlock vanilla Naruto. Seems like the order is in reverse. But it's got new cutscenes, it also reuses old ones from Ultimate Ninja 3. It skips a lot of fights, replacing them with slideshows. Even when you actually have the characters to use those fights, they could just let you play that fight instead of giving you a PowerPoint presentation. Overall, it feels like a worse version of the Ultimate Ninja 3 story, and it's annoying as hell to unlock. Think about it. You're midway through the Chunin exams arc and you run out of orbs, so you gotta go back into Master Mode and hunt for collectibles before returning back to Hero Mode. Really not a fan of the way they did things here. Combat received some changes, which I really like. First of all, the ultimate you launch is no longer selected by you. Instead, it changes throughout the battle, giving you a stronger ultimate when you're at low health. Most characters can also power up by doing a specific action. Some will power up after landing an ultimate, others will power up after taunting, or characters like Neji will power up after landing a big combo, which makes characters a lot more unique than before. When you launch an ultimate, the clash minigame is always button combinations, it's never mashing anymore, which is also a really good change in my opinion. The combinations are also the same for player 1 and player 2, so basically it's testing your reactions, seeing who reacts faster to the buttons that show up on screen. They also added a rock, paper, scissors mechanic whenever one of your attacks clashes with your opponents, which adds more RNG to this party game. Not a fan of that. And the whole combat system is still very mashy, since you can still get out of combos by spending a tiny bit of chakra to substitute, though the amount of chakra that you generate by charging has been nerfed quite a bit, but still you will almost always have enough to substitute out of a combo. In conclusion, I absolutely loved the free roaming from Konoha to the Sand Village. Always loved whenever gameplay was interrupted by a beautiful cutscene, and in combat, thanks to the different ways characters power up, each one of them feels a lot more unique. That said, the Shippuden story was definitely rushed and feels incomplete, and the battle system is still mashy and unbalanced as hell. I definitely consider this game to be slightly better than 3, so we're gonna rank it right above Ultimate Ninja 3. And with that, we move on to the next entry of the series. We're going straight into Ultimate Ninja 5. Okay, before we even talk about the game itself, we gotta talk about the way this game was released, because oh my god, it was a mess. Every single Ultimate Ninja game had at least 3 versions: the Japanese version, the North American version, and the European version. Ultimate Ninja 5 never came out in the US, which means that for the first time you've only got the Japanese version and the European version. This might not sound like a big deal, but so far I've actually ignored the European versions of Ultimate Ninja, because the European versions were all inferior games to the Japanese and North American versions. Back in the day, you had 2 different standards for televisions. In Japan and North America, TVs were NTSC, which ran games at 60 frames per second. In Europe, the standard was PAL, which ran games at 50 frames per second. CyberConnect 2 never did a good job porting their games from 60 FPS to 50 FPS. So the Ultimate Ninja games always felt much worse in the EU versions. They ran sluggish, as if the gameplay itself had been slowed down. Now, I've ignored this so far because I've been able to play the North American versions, but now the only version with English is the EU version, which means the only version that I can actually review runs like garbage. Very early in the Ranking of Naruto games, I had to make a decision. I knew there were a bunch of weird Naruto games that were only released in Japan, and for as much as I would like to review them, I I just don't understand what's going on. I think understanding the language of the game is the bare minimum to be able to review it. I understand I'm leaving out a bunch of fan favorites, but a compromise had to be made. I can only review games that came out in the West, which means the only version of Ultimate Ninja 5 that I can review is the one that runs like trash. From this point on, I hacked my very legal PS2 into running the game at 110% speed. So the gameplay you'll see from now on actually looks a lot better than what it actually is. Alright, Ultimate Ninja 5 did away with hero mode, so the only story mode available is master mode, which they improved in several ways. They reused the world from Ultimate Ninja 4, which allowed them to expand and tailor an even better story for everyone to play. This time, you actually rescue Gaara, and right after that... Okay, this credit song is a banger, but are you serious? They really just finished the arc that they left unfinished from Ultimate Ninja 4? That makes me feel even worse. It feels like they just finished the game and made you buy it again. Psych! They did it again, folks. The story continues after the credits, and it goes all the way to Sasuke versus Team 7. So it's actually a decent length story, especially given the amount of cutscenes and the fact that everything is voice acted. You can also free roam with different characters this time around and even select the team that you run with, allowing you to switch characters on the fly. Some of the movement options from Ultimate Ninja 4 were removed, which was a bummer, and they were replaced with abilities that would allow you to scout the map, destroy walls, pull levers. To unlock these abilities, you need to fight in the open world, which is even worse than before. It's not as flashy, it's just bad. But by defeating enemies, you get XP, which then you spend on the characters, and depending on where you put the points, you unlock new abilities to explore that world. This new approach to RPG, giving you the ability to level up multiple characters, was definitely a welcome change, but since the combat is terrible, and that's the only way to level up, it does become tedious. Also, for some reason, the camera controls are inverted in the European version, but they're normal in the Japanese version. Like, who told them Europe liked to play inverted? This version is a mess. After you're done with the main story, the game once again gives you a bunch of side content. Even though they're mostly fetch quests and nothing really interesting happens gameplay-wise, it's fully written and voice acting, giving life to Konoha and once again using the Naruto characters to great effect. The writing is really where most of the side quest quality comes from. The way quests pop up is also somewhat dynamic, makes the village feel alive, though it's also very easy to get stuck. For instance, if you have someone related to your next quest equipped on your current team, the quest just won't pop up, and the game won't tell you why. Once you do enough side stuff in the post-game, suddenly you unlock Sasuke's master mode. Straight up, gives you control of Sasuke, trying to clear this dungeon in Orochimaru's hideout. A really cool surprise, locked behind optional content. And then the game is like, hey, do this again, but with Naruto. Like, really? You had such a really nice surprise, and then you just ruin it. Like, the dungeon isn't that good. It's not good enough to play twice. Combat-wise, there were a couple of big changes. The biggest one was assists. You can now just call assists in neutral in combos while in block string while getting hit. You can just call them whenever, and the cooldown is ridiculously small, so it made the mashy combat even more mashy. But I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, because this game was already a party game. It was already super random, not meant to be competitive in any way. The assists take it even further away from that, but that's fine, because it's in favor of fan service, which is the thing this game is very good at. And that's even better when you add specific team combos and specific team ultimates to really complete that fan service. Absolutely love the free roaming, the side missions, the main story. It's a really fun game to play through. Discovering team combos as you unlock new characters kept it interesting, but man, that open world combat was bad. And the regular combat is even more chaotic thanks to the addition of assists. Still, it's a game that I would consider a lot better than Ultimate Ninja 4, but not quite enough to overtake Broken Bond. So we're gonna place it right there at B rank. Psych! That's where I'd put it if it didn't run like garbage. D rank. That's how bad the performance in this game is. It plays in slow motion, just like all the other Ultimate Ninja games in Europe. There's no excuse. It's the 5th game they release over here, and I've been able to ignore it so far, but this time, this is the only English version of the game. So for as good as the content is, if it runs like trash, it's not fun. I bet you weren't expecting Ultimate Ninja 5 to be ranked this low when you started this video, and to be honest, neither did I. But turns out the game that I played when I was a kid was the Japanese version. That said, this was not the last Ultimate Ninja. The series actually continued on the PSP, but that is a game for another time. Unfortunately, before we get to that, we're gonna have to revisit the worst Naruto series so far. Yep, it is time to go back to Ninja Council. Here is Ninja Council 4, which is technically Ninja Council 5. The Ninja Council games are complicated. Ninja Council 4 was technically Ninja Council 2 European version that we reviewed a couple of episodes ago. But here with the titled game Ninja Council 4, which is kind of Ninja Council 5, it's confusing. I'll just call it Ninja Council 4 from now on. The game did improve a lot, especially considering Ninja Council 3 was the game that broke me and sits quietly at the bottom of this ranking for now. Ninja Council 4 keeps a lot of the previous game DNA, but now you play with Shippuden characters, and you actually play through the Naruto Shippuden story until the Sasori fight. I would actually say that for the first time in this series, there's actually a significant difference between playing different characters. Previously, they all just play the same, but had different special moves. This time, they all still fight the same, but not only do they have different specials, each character also has a unique ability. For instance, Naruto can summon Gamabunta and jump into high places where other characters cannot get to. Kakashi summons Spakun, who pushes buttons out of reach. Lee's movement is far superior to anyone else's, he jumps really high. Neji can use Byakugan to mark the map with items and collectibles, so there's an actual reason to play with different characters instead of just it being an aesthetic change. Picking different assists can also be useful, though most of them just deal damage when you need to, with the exception of Sakura, who can actually heal you, and that makes her probably the best assist in the game. Along with that single improvement, there are also a bunch of others that really impressed me. For instance, you now have a new uppercut move by pressing up and the attack button with every character. That's really a godsend for flying enemies. Running and jumping attacks got a massive buff, which makes defeating enemies a lot faster if you know what you're doing, and I really like those changes, but at the same time, they also removed the block button. So now you can't just block regular attacks and wait for a punish, you actually gotta jump to dodge around stuff. It's not like the block button was overpowered or anything, most boss moves were already unblockable, so it's kind of a weird choice. And I think the previous game was also a bit more bold in trying new concepts for different levels, like a Sasuke snowboarding level, for instance. This one doesn't really have those kinds of gimmicks because each level is designed to be replayed with each character, so they didn't get too crazy with any of them, which makes all the levels kinda play the same. Also, probably for the first time in the series, the map is actually useful. It actually shows the level, giving you a sense of space beyond the tiny screen. It's super basic, but it took them 5 games to finally get there. That said, the incentive to explore and replay these levels with different characters still isn't there. You can collect the leaves, which are the currency you spend to upgrade your characters between levels. You basically buy new jutsu and new support characters, and sometimes you get an extra life, so you start from the last checkpoint instead of replaying the whole level. That's it. No collectibles, no unlockables, nothing really. And the currency is actually separate, meaning if you collect something with Naruto, you can only use it to upgrade Naruto. So if at some point you wanted to try a new character, you're gonna have to start playing them with a single jutsu, which kind of discouraged me from swapping characters since the levels do generally get harder as they go. Difficulty wise, this isn't nearly as hard as Ninja Council 2 European. That Orochimaru boss fight is still probably the hardest boss fight I've played in this series, which is not to say that this game doesn't have a ton of cheap stuff. Touching enemies still knocks you down, wall jumping can still be awkward because of the specific angles it requires, and that Deidara level, man, that Deidara level. Imagine platforming while explosives are falling from the sky, except the screen is too small to see them coming, so you just randomly get hit all the way back down. Regarding boss fights, there are some unique fights here, but a lot of them are still the same uninteresting one-on-one fights without a lot of gimmicks. In that regard, I don't think a single Ninja Council game has done it better than the first one. And finally, it wouldn't be a Ninja Council without some really silliness in animation and music. For instance, we got the Kakashi dance that all the kids are talking about. Yeah, dance Kakashi. If you're not a fan of that, maybe you'd like to check out the Garashimi. It matches the music and everything. And speaking of music, no track in this game is able to beat the legendary Composition 12 from Ninja Council 2, but there are definitely some gems. Especially the soundtrack from the last level, where it feels like they just threw a bunch of instruments together and started slapping them at random. This is a 20-second loop that plays throughout the entire level. In conclusion, I like all the quality of life changes, the map, the new uppercut, giving characters unique abilities, but I feel like the game also lost some stuff. Namely, those unique levels we had previously, and a lot of unique boss fights just aren't there. It's mostly a one-on-one battle that you use the same formula to win every time. It's a very similar game to Ninja Council 2 European, though I would say it's slightly worse, so we're gonna place it right below that. It is another D-rank game. We got a lot of those for sure. Let's see if the next game will be better or worse than that. Had to dress up for this one because it is time for Naruto Shippuden, Legends, Akatsuki Rising. It's a third-person action game that builds on the foundation of the Uzumaki Chronicles games on PlayStation 2. And since it's now Naruto Shippuden, you could kinda call it a sequel. This time it doesn't tell an original story, it unfortunately does not feature the Master Puppet. It tells the Naruto Shippuden story from the start until you rescue Gaara, so pretty much the same as Ninja Council 4. Comparing this to Uzumaki Chronicles 2, the game is missing so many features. First of all, there's only one attack button. They removed the strong attack, so combos are much simpler, and that's a shame because I kinda liked the combo system before. It felt like I could get creative, and now it just feels like I mash and do special moves, and in boss fights I'm just exploiting some weakness. That's how you actually beat this game. Exploit the crap out of something and play super cheap. And it all somehow feels much worse than previously. There's a stiffness to the movement and attack animations that just feels wrong. And your enemies move around so much that it can be easy for you to misjudge if an attack is gonna hit or not, because most of them have deceptively short range and your momentum isn't really carried into the attack. So the whole thing feels pretty damn terrible. At the start of any mission, you can pick any character to play that mission, which can also lead to some disconnected moments within the story. For instance, you pick Neji as your character, and then you have this cutscene where Naruto runs into Itachi in the story and gets trapped in his genjutsu. You guys remember that? So for Naruto to escape the genjutsu, it cuts the gameplay and it's Neji fighting? That's a weird way to retell the story. You can also pick 2 other party members. They won't become assists or anything. They just give you some stat buffs and they take a cut of your XP, because once again, each character has separate experience points. They all level up separately as you play them, which to me is discouraging. Like, I don't want to swap characters if I'm gonna have to level them up all the way from level 1 to whatever level I'm at. I'll just play my highest level character. Otherwise, it's just a grind. And I'm okay with grinding once in a while, but the problem is, the missions, they're all pretty much the same. They are so bland. First, you usually walk around these hubs. So, some Konoha exploration, you go into the sand, you go into the forest. Okay, that seems fun. Around these hubs, you'll find enemies and treasure chests. These chests can include items like shuriken, which are consumables. You can actually run out of thrown weapons. And once in a while, they also include jutsu, which is pretty much the only incentive to exploring these areas. Thing is, the best way to collect jutsu is to find a single treasure chest next to a save point and just farm that same chest over and over until you get the jutsu you want. So really, even though these are semi-open areas, there's really no incentive to explore. And whenever they decide to get more creative with their mission design, somehow they make it worse. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the worst mission I've ever played in a Naruto game. Retake the tower. There are 2 towers and the mission tells you that bandits have taken them over. You need to go to both towers and kick their ass. So I head to the north tower, running across the desert. And this is not exactly a small walk. I reach the north tower and there's Iruka. He says that the tower is closed. You need to start with the other one. What? Why? Why wasn't I briefed on? Why did I just travel across the desert? So you gotta backtrack the whole desert you just traveled, take a different path that is just as long and make it into the south tower. The south tower has 6 floors full of enemies. Defeating them all, one by one. By the time you reach floor 5, you will see this lever. You don't know what it does, but you pull it anyway. Get to floor 6 and the door is closed. Uh-oh. That means the lever that I just pulled did not open this door, which means it probably opened the door to the other tower in the north. The game doesn't tell you this, you have to figure it out. And by the way, if you didn't kill every enemy in these 6 floors, the game won't let you leave the tower. Again, without telling you why you're stuck. I can't tell you how many times I've been stuck in this mission. So you run across the desert again. The north tower is now open. Congratulations, here are 4 more floors full of enemies. Did I mention how much I hate combat in this game yet? Get to the 4th floor and oh, there's another lever. Let's pull it. Nothing happens. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Run across the desert once more to the south tower. Make your way up to the 6th floor. Thank God enemies did not respawn. Turns out the door on the 6th floor gives you direct access to the north tower. I don't understand why I have to run across the entire desert when the 2 towers are actually connected to each other. This game doesn't make sense. Anyway, there are a bunch of bees in this floor and you defeat them. Mission over. I guarantee you, no one play tested this mission and said, ah yes, this is a good one. Retake the tower will be a highlight of our game. And as you travel through these different areas during these side missions, you may have noticed that enemies have different levels in different zones. This is, after all, an RPG. But it can be so wildly random. For instance, you can be walking in Konoha, surrounded by level 7 bandits, and out of nowhere, here's a level 30 bird. Why? I have finished this game. I still don't know why that bird is there. And don't get me started on the centipedes. Gosh, the centipede. There's an early mission that wants you to kill centipedes. They're They're level 20, which is pretty high for an early mission, but on top of that, they are absolute sponges. They have so much health, and they keep going underground, which makes killing them super annoying. And also they kill you in 2 hits. This whole RPG system is very poorly built. The difficulty is all over the place. There's no steady difficulty ramp, it's nothing but spikes. I do like the upgrade system a bit, not as much as the board from Uzumaki Chronicles where you would fit the jutsu, but it is fine. You can level up each jutsu individually, you can unequip and equip the jutsu you want, and if you have any leftover space, you can fill it up with attack, defense, or chakra bonuses. It's alright. Outside of that, what else is there? Oh, the cutscenes. We've played games on PSP that have looked alright. This one was very ambitious with 3D cutscenes, and they are so poorly animated. I'm talking Jump Force levels of poor animation. This Shadow Clone Jutsu Rasengan is such a great example. Faces have absolutely zero expression. I don't know what goes through their heads when choosing a soundtrack for most of these cutscenes. Like, here's the scene where Naruto learns that Gaara is dead after rescuing him from the Akatsuki. And you tell me if you think this is the right song to play during this sad moment.
偉そうにそんな言葉作って呼んでんじゃねえ
Uh-oh, there goes Naruto vibrating again. The best thing I can say about these cutscenes is when they are not telling the main story and you're just doing side missions, the writing is pretty good. It's a bunch of jokes usually centered around Tsunade, and a few of them actually made me laugh out loud. It's very good humor. And all the cutscenes are voice acted as well, which includes the side missions, and in side missions you can still pick any character you want, which means they have actually recorded voices for all playable characters for every mission, and that's definitely praiseworthy. But that's also really all I can praise. It feels like a very complete game. There's a ton of post-game content that you unlock with the Akatsuki after the game is done. It feels like a full product, but it's a bad one, because what you unlock is more dull missions, and this combat just feels bad. So it doesn't matter how much there is, because I don't want to play any of it. This won't be a D-rank game, because it's a bad game. At least it has a lot of content, so we're gonna rank it at the top of E. But geez, this feels like the most low-effort game I've ranked so far. Actually, I take that back. Ninja Council 3 is still the most low-effort thing I've played in this ranking. Then again, we're about to play Ninja Destiny 2, which is somehow 2 different games? Yeah, let me explain. So how did Ninja Destiny become 2 games? Well, at first I was just gonna play Naruto Shippuden Ninja Destiny 2. And so far it was all that I expected, the Nintendo DS version of the Clash of Ninja games. Characters still have some unique combos, there aren't a lot of jutsu, which is weird for a Naruto game. It relies a lot on punching and kicking. And the game is still very much a casual game because even though it's one-on-one battles, you can just teleport to your opponent's back at any time, creating infinite combos or block strings. Ultimates are still unblockable, which means if you time them on wake up, you'll hit your opponent every single time. That said, it's not the same as the first game. There were some quality of life improvements. First of all, story mode. Story mode is no longer just 20 minutes, it's an hour long, and you can now save your progress. You don't have to play through it all in one sitting. They've also added some exploration. You can walk around Konoha, even though there's really no reason to do it most of the time. Story mode has 2 side missions, and that's it. But whenever you leave Konoha, there's also this seemingly random maze where you walk around to find the exit, and while you're doing that, you're finding new items that you can use during battle. These are the same items as the first Ninja Destiny, and you also run into generic ninja as you're trying to find where to go. These are completely random encounters. They can get annoying, but they're pretty easy to clear too. Overall, it's a nice upgrade. Gives you more to do during story mode. I think it's weird that they never tried to do this with the Clash of Ninja series, which was their biggest game. They just tried it on the Nintendo DS games. Especially since during some of these exploration bits, there's some actual platforming, which from this top-down perspective and with the stiff controls this game has, is really not a great experience. Story mode covers the beginning of Naruto Shippuden. Naruto arrives at the village, saves Gaara, and then it ends when you find and fight against Sasuke. No credits song this time, which made me feel insulted given how many times I've heard that credit song on the first Ninja Destiny. And after you're done with story mode, you unlock quest mode, where you can select a character and you go through several floors of this random dungeon. Once you reach floor 20, you unlock a new character. In fact, from this point forward, unlocking characters is the game's progression, and you can do it by beating story mode again on difficult, beating this quest mode, and also surviving 15 enemies in survival battle. After you've done all of that, the game is done, you've unlocked everything, and you can play wireless battles if you can find someone else that owns the game and the Nintendo DS. Just like the first game, characters have unique movesets, and they've increased the roster size like crazy. The addition of exploration breaks the monotony of fight after fight, and it's a welcome change. That said, it still has very little content. You can squeeze out hours of gameplay for this, but it's always doing the same stuff, and the combat system is still broken as hell. You can easily teleport at any time and build build any infinite you want. It's still a bad game, albeit a little bit better than the first Ninja Destiny. I'd say even better than the first Ultimate Ninja Heroes, so let's give it an E rank right below Akatsuki Rising. Now, I said Ninja Destiny 2 was 2 games because everything that I just described was the American version of the game. There's also an European version. This one is called Naruto Ninja Destiny 2. You heard it right, it's Naruto, not Naruto Shippuden. I thought we were done with the original Naruto games, but apparently not. You start the game and everything is the same, the menu music, the menu itself, but it's lacking any Shippuden characters or story. The story is original in this one, and oh boy, is it a lazy ass story. Naruto is depressed. I assume because Sasuke left the village, the game doesn't say why, so Tsunade comes up with a mission for him. He's gotta retrieve some scrolls, but he's gotta be careful because these scrolls are booby-trapped. So Naruto finds the first scroll and poof, Shikamaru pops out. They fight and Shikamaru is like, my mission is done here. And you repeat this way too many times with other characters popping out, and in the end you find out that everyone was popping out of scrolls just to cheer you up. Naruto's ninja friends were just getting beaten up so Naruto could feel better. That's the story. After you're done with that little arc, you go back to Tsunade and ask for some special training. Tsunade sends him into one of those dungeons where you explore and fight, and at the end of each dungeon you fight against a strong character like the Akatsuki. And in the end you find out that all of those were illusions by Kurenai. That's the story, the end. After story mode is done, you also unlock quest mode, but this time this is where you unlock most of your characters. You've got to beat 30 floors on this quest mode with all 10 characters to unlock every character in the game, which is an extremely tedious task. And because the game had no Shippuden characters, it got some bonus characters that even the North American version didn't have, like Asuma, Kurenai, and all the Hokage. So no matter which version you got, you never had the full game. Pros and cons for this game are very similar. After all, it was pretty much the same game. It played exactly the same, only with a worse story and less characters. And despite it having less characters, the progression was actually a lot grindier than the American version. It's just barely better than the first Ninja Destiny, so we're gonna rank it directly above it, down there at E rank. Ninja Destiny 2 is still a mystery to me. I have no idea why they released these two different versions. It's not like they were protecting Europe from spoilers. And this would actually become the last Ninja Destiny released in the West. There was a Ninja Destiny 3, but that was Japan only and never got ported over. Thanks to Ninja Destiny 2, this was a very painful week for me, but that pain is now behind us as we move on to one of the favorites of all time, Clash of Ninja Revolution 3. We'll be right back. Clash of Ninja games have been so close so many times, but I knew this one would not disappoint me. For context, there are a lot of Clash of Ninja games and we've ranked a few in the past, and others, well, we can't really rank them because they are Japan-only releases. With this series, we had to draw the line somewhere, and if I cannot understand the language, then I cannot review the game. That was my own rule that I self-imposed. Now, for a fighting game like Clash of Ninja, the language may not be that important. But I didn't want to make an exception. It's an easy to understand distinction, and if I made an exception here, I would have to consider other exceptions too. Now, some of the best Clash of Ninja games were actually only released in Japan, the most famous case perhaps being Clash of Ninja 4, which came out for the GameCube. But then when it came to the West, it was Clash of Ninja Revolution 2 for the Wii, and it didn't even have online. The Clash series has been so close to being good for a really long time, so why is Revolution 3 better? Because they finally took the Japanese game and just translated it and ported it to the West. It was that simple. Story mode follows the first arc of Naruto Shippuden and ends with that famous Deidara fight that everyone thinks is super hard. Took me 34 tries and it was definitely challenging. We even made a video with all the failed attempts in case you missed it. Click the card above if you're curious. But you weren't that tough, Deidara. Fuck you. There was one other mission that was really awesome to play, and that was the Guy mirror match. The CPU basically mirrors all of your inputs, so it takes some brain power to overcome it. And I thought it was really fun to figure it out. You can't just power through it, because if you try, then the CPU also tries to power through it. And it's moments like these that make this story mode really memorable. They kept the same cutscene style from Revolution 2, everything is voiced as well, which if you compare it to previous Clash of Ninja games is really good, but CyberConnect 2 would just blow them out of the water with Ultimate Ninja Storm 2 the following year, so by comparison, this is just okay. Also, they give you plenty of variety in fighting formats. You have the one-on-one battles obviously, but then you also have team battles and other modes the game presents you with, which keeps the story mode fresh and fun. The whole thing is about 2 hours long, and after that, the game kinda sucks. You look at your roster and you've barely unlocked unlocked anyone, and that's because they went back to unlocking characters in the store. You need to buy most characters, and grinding the currency to do it is an absolute pain. There are a few game modes that you can play. You have score attack, time attack, survival, which are all basically just fighting against the CPU and beating them as best as you can. Then you also have kumite, which is where you fight against a bunch of weaker enemies, but this game mode barely gives you any currency, so it's really bad for unlocking characters. Character prices may vary, but to unlock the cheapest characters, you would need around 17 battles, and for some of the most expensive, we're talking 60 battles or even more. Now do that for a total of 30 characters or so. It's a massive chore. If you have a friend to play with, I can see it being okay. You just learn the characters you have and practice while unlocking new ones. But even then, these prices are way too high. This simply wasn't the way to do progression. And all that stuff is gonna weigh in on the final rank, but this is a fighting game, so what matters the most is the actual fighting. Unlike the previous games, you can now turn off boxes and transitions from the menu, eliminating those random factors, making it an even more competitive game. And the game also features a few new systems. You've got a few new options on wake up, like the wake up kick or substitution. You have the explosive kunai, which were actually in Revolution 2, but since there was no online there, they really started shining in this game. Some characters don't even use Y cancels anymore to extend combos, they use explosive kunai. Every character now has a comeback mechanic when they reach low health, and it's character specific. Some gain new moves, others stop spending chakra for some of their specials or supers, they may gain armor. There's really a lot, and it all helps make each character more unique. And despite having this new mechanic on top, this is the most balanced roster a Clash of Ninja game has ever seen. The community that still plays this agrees that this roster is still balanced nowadays, with a couple of exceptions. Deidara is very strong, Kiba is banned, and Kurenai is way too weak. That's 3 characters out of a roster of 40 in a game that's been played for over 10 years now. That's super impressive. Every character also gets an air throw now. They all have multiple supers with different properties, and a lot of their moves spend chakra, even if they're not supers, which forces you to be a lot more mindful of when to use your moves. All of these changes are great, and they add a lot more depth to this fighting game, even if it makes it a bit scary to jump into it now when some people haven't stopped playing it for 10 years. Out of all of these additions, there's only one that I'm not a fan of, and it's the hand signs. Characters can do these hand signs that either buff their attack or recover chakra, and this is a mechanic that is exclusive to the Wiimote and the nunchuck. If you're not playing with those, you simply don't have a way to do this. It's not like it's a super busted mechanic, but locking an extra move behind a specific type of controller kinda sucks. This is very simple. It's the story mode from Revolution 2, which was a nice step up, with the option to remove boxes and stage transitions, allowing the combat to shine. With online play and a bunch of new mechanics, this easily becomes the best Naruto fighting game in our ranking. That said, it's lacking in content. Even though it has a few game modes, they're all just fighting against the CPU, and the grind to unlock the characters is just not fun at all. Besides, they still have some issues with hitboxes. I guess that's the Clash of Ninja curse. We're gonna give it the A rank, but not ahead of Storm 3 or 4. The story mode and production quality and graphics really push those games ahead, but if you ask me which one has the best multiplayer, hands down, Clash of Ninja Revolution 3. We're gonna talk about some bad Naruto games. Again, Naruto Shippuden, Naruto vs Sasuke. If you've watched previous ranking episodes, then this game probably looks familiar. Yup, it's another Ninja Council game. A series so bad that it's the only one with F rank games in our current ranking, and the games that aren't F rank aren't that much better. And it seems like Tomy knew this, so they completely dropped the Ninja Council name from their games from here on out, even though they're still very much Ninja Council games. And this is the 6th Ninja Council game they've made, and once again, no major improvements over the last game. It's a level-based side-scroller. It keeps some of the quality of life changes brought to you by the last titles, like running attacks dealing more damage, which makes running through these levels a little less painful. But somehow they made the level design worse. You still have the typical levels where you just run to the right and defeat enemies, but whenever they decide to get a bit more creative, it just sucks. It's missions where you have to press buttons to open doors, but then you have to backtrack a bunch. They ask you to do some precision platforming where their controls are and have always been garbage. This is immediately a big step down. The big new thing is that you can now switch characters in the middle of the mission. You can just swap between your party of 3, changing the active character. And they do have a little fan service there because some characters can do combo jutsu. Then again, not many do, so it really is just a little bit of fan service. You'll still have doors or obstacles that are locked and only certain characters can open them depending on their abilities, which means that if you don't bring the right character to a certain mission, you might not be able to get all the collectibles on your first run. Collectibles are important important because they unlock new characters, which can be support only or playable characters. And that helps diversify the gameplay a little bit, but not that much because they don't play that differently from one another. Ninja Castle 2 European version still is the one that did character uniqueness the best, where each character really played differently. In this one, they do have different movement speeds, jump heights, and unique jutsu, but it's not that drastic of a difference anymore. The game retells the story of the Sasuke rescue arc, and like every game from this era, once you finish it, you unlock Sasuke, who is Omega busted. Just moves faster, jumps higher, has armored jutsu, deals more damage, you know, the usual. And it wouldn't be a Ninja Castle game without an absolute gem in the soundtrack. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the music that plays in the main menu. Now, to be fair, I did enjoy most of the tracks in this game. The soundtrack wasn't bad at all, but it always needs to have that one track that is just like, what were they thinking? Anyway, this is the 6th Ninja Council game, and it still feels like they've been recycling enemies from other games. You're still fighting wolves and birds throughout the levels. When you reach Orochimaru's hideout, you have a boss fight against fucking lobsters. Lobsters, dude. You could have done so much with Orochimaru's hideout, but lobsters. Look, I don't want to downplay this too much, so let's recognize what it does well. Being able to switch characters is cool. It allows you to manage your health between your members, and sometimes use unique abilities to skip some parts of the level. There are some unique story mode characters, like when Naruto awakens his Nine Tails chakra and fights against Orochimaru in a boss fight that's pretty much the same as all other boss fights against ninja characters. After playing through a level that's not that different from anything they've done in the past 6 games, and somewhat when they do become different, they are worse than ever before and so annoying to complete. And then they make you repeat some of them to unlock new characters. Nope, it's a bad game. E rank, let's put it above Ninja Destiny 2 though. In reality, this game is not that different from Ninja Council 4, which is a full rank above, but I really do feel like the level design in this one is a lot worse. And I also think it's fair to be exhausted of this formula when they have been doing the same thing for 6 games now. 6 very bad games. Let's move on to something that's a bit better, hopefully. It is the much anticipated Dragon Blade Chronicles. We'll be right back. Did you know that I streamed this whole game on Twitch? Since I finished the games before I ranked them, I figured, hey, why not stream a couple of them? And I actually stream every weekday on twitch.tv/Globku. Go ahead and give me a follow if you'd like to catch the next Naruto game. Naruto Shippuden Dragon Blade Chronicles. I've been reading people's reactions from back in 2009 when the game first came out. It was universally hated. This game is the definition of a cash grab, and I completely agree, but also, I found it pretty entertaining. There are 2 types of bad games for me. The ones that are just boring or frustrating. It's just an overall bad time. And then we have the games that are so bad that they actually make you laugh and end up being pretty entertaining. Like, what's this animation, Naruto? Wait, guys, Rock Lee's coming in. Look at his leaf hurricane. Dragon Blade Chronicles is a 3D action-adventure game, which is not very common in Naruto games. It feels like Tommy looked at the success of Free Roaming in Storm, Broken Bond, Rise of a Ninja, and said, we need one of them 3D action games, and it should come out next year. But sir, that's not enough time to make a full game.
Do we have any action games in production?
Well, we have Slay the Dragon of the Mythic Mountain, which is almost ready, sir.
Perfect. Scrap that and make that a Naruto game.
Now, I don't know if that actually happened, but it would explain a lot. Like, why Naruto mainly fights with a weapon, why he fights these enemies the entire game, why there's a scroll system for equipping jutsu, which includes stuff that he knows, like the Rasengan, and stuff that he never learned, like fireballs. In fact, maybe it's because they had to fit Naruto into this whole different game with its pre-built systems that they came up with the story of a girl that goes to the Leaf Village to ask for help, because her brother is making dragons evil to wipe out the world or something, but these dragons are in a mountain where you can't use chakra unless you wear these awesome dragon outfits. And thanks to these dragon outfits, they can now use chakra again and equip scrolls and do everything the previous game had planned. Genius. The reason for giving characters these outfits is silly. They could have just, you know, let them use chakra in the mountain. I mean, they end up doing it anyway. But I'll say, these outfits, they look really cool. Even the Akatsuki wears them. They're great redesigns and probably the best thing to come out of this game. The game structure is pretty straightforward. You go through a level with some combat and some platforming. If you fall down a pit, it's game over, which with these controls, yikes. It's a fixed camera, which is sometimes not ideal for these platforming sections, but at the end of each level, you have a dragon to defeat, after which you swap to Sasuke, who goes through roughly the same level, and it repeats until you get to the final dragon boss, and also fight this kid's brother, whose name is Kuroma. That's kind of unfortunate. At this time, no one knew the real name of the Ninetales, which is Kurama, and these guys got so close to it that this entire story almost made no no sense. The combat is fun. There are a few options, especially once you unlock the ability to combo into jutsu, so you can get a bit more experimental. But there's also no reason to fight most of the time, since there's no experience or level up system. You're just encouraged to explore, to find chests with new jutsu or health upgrades, but you can skip most enemies without having to worry about it too much. It's got some good progression. You gain combos and new jutsu at a decent rate. I can't say this game ever got boring, even if some enemies are kind of frustrating to fight. Everything that made me jump to attack was so infuriating. The fixed camera doesn't help. It's hard to tell how close an enemy is sometimes, and your air options are so limited, and these freaking beams are everywhere. Even though they die in one hit, it is so annoying to fight them. The boss fights are cool though. Both all the dragons and the Akatsuki members provide unique boss fight moments. You even have a fight against the nine-tailed Fantafox. But I do wish these bosses had health bars. Sometimes it's hard to tell how close you are to killing them, but at least the fights are fun. And even during the levels, they have some fun mechanics, like using water to solidify lava, creating a platform that you can stand on. And the whole story is voice acted. The soundtrack is also really good. Look at Sakura dancing to it. She loves it. So overall, it doesn't sound like a game that deserved all the hate it got back then, until you discover that it was a full-priced game and that it's 5 hours long with no replay value. And even though it was just 5 hours, some areas are just broken. You have severe frame drops whenever there are too many enemies on screen, and some segments where the terrain is falling down just run like absolute garbage. Even the level design was flawed. For instance, close to the start, you have this blue wall, and you cannot break this wall until you defeat the first boss, which is the water dragon. Makes sense. Water dragon, blue wall. Okay, let's get the thing from the water dragon to break the blue wall. Problem is, once you defeat the water dragon, there's no way to return here. This is not a free roaming open world sandbox. Once you're done with level 1, you're going to level 2, and that's it. So that wall is locked forever. I will say, even though this was definitely a cash grab, the game's different levels, unique boss fights, and okay gameplay made it at least entertaining. And I would be angry too if I paid full price for a 5-hour game that felt recycled and ran terribly at times, but I think overall, I was pretty entertained by the whole thing. So I have a really hard time calling this a bad game, especially looking at some of the other bad games here on this list. But you know what? Honestly, I would rather play this again than Uzumaki Chronicles 2. And Uzumaki Chronicles 2 had a lot more content, and I mean hours and hours, but it never felt as tailored or unique as this one. Plus, those dragon outfits look cool. We're gonna smack it right there at the top of D tier, even if it did in fact feel like this game was something else entirely before it became a Naruto game. Tomy isn't done making games, but all that's left for me to rank them is 2 more Ninja Council games. Naruto Shippuden Shinobi Rumble is listed as a part of the Ninja Council series, and judging by the soundtrack and the sprite work, I can see why, but that's where the similarities end. This is no longer a side-scrolling brawler, this is now a fighting game, or a platform fighter, and you know what? It's a pretty good one at that. The game has a light and a strong attack, but the strong attack changes with directions, and that gives characters a launcher that they can follow up with an air combo, a side launcher that throws the opponent into a corner, and the down strong attack is usually some unique attack for the character like Jiraiya's Needle Jizo. Hitting someone with a jumping attack usually gives you a ground bounce too, which you can combo from. And there are a few systems in place to prevent loops and infinite combos. So even though there's a very free-form combo structure that's actually super beginner friendly as well, there are systems in place to prevent it from being broken, and it feels awesome. On the touchscreen, each character has 3 special moves. Tapping the text does the special move fast, and you can even implement the jutsu into combos. And then if you tap the ultra button, the screen stops, and that special becomes a super. Once you have 3 bars, you can also activate Chakrush, which is a mode in which your character armors through everything, and you can spam supers until you run out of meter. This is pretty much how you beat the hardest CPU fights, but in a real match, you can actually use your mobility to get away from them and time waste a bit. Movement-wise, you have a double jump, you can air dash, so you can totally instant air dash like an anime fighter, so even that part of the game feels good. But you might be thinking, combos in a Naruto game? Can't the opponent just spam substitution and get out of it? No. In this game, substitutions are not a combo breaker. They are a tech tool. When you're knocked down, you can substitute to get out of wake-up pressure. And in neutral, you can teleport around at the cost of some meter. That's it. No combo breakers. I was not expecting a Ninja Council game to turn into a fighting game, and a good one on top of that. This was the best surprise I've had in this entire series. I wish there was a way to play this game in multiplayer in a way that was more accessible than you know, having two Nintendo DSs with 2 copies of the game and having the other person right next to me so we can play via wireless connection. Multiplayer on DS always feels like a hassle. I wish this game was on some other platform. The game has a few modes. Story mode starts after the Kakuzu fight and ends in the epic battle between Sasuke and Itachi, going through Jiraiya's death as well, so it's an interesting arc. Story mode features 1v1 fights, but since this fighting system supports up to 4 characters on stage, it varies the amount of characters and team compositions. Sometimes it's a 2v1, sometimes it's a 2v2, sometimes it's a 3v1 or a 4-player free-for-all, something that you can also replicate in versus mode. Story mode is kinda short, but by the end of it, the game gives you a summoning sign, which is this symbol right here. Once you replicate that symbol in the summoning menu, it unlocks Itachi, and that's how you unlock characters and stages in this game. To get the other symbols, you gotta pick a character in personal battle and go through a series of 10 battles, sort of like an arcade mode. Or you could just look up the symbols online and unlock everything in 5 minutes. And I love that about this. It's a fighting game. Some people just want to practice and they want to fight, so giving them the option to not have to go through hours of arcade mode to unlock every character is a great way to do unlockables in a fighting game. The roster size is very decent for a Nintendo DS game, especially since every character has a unique moveset. They don't just change specials, all of their strong attacks have different properties. For instance, even though everyone has a launcher, Naruto will jump up and you can automatically follow up with a combo, but Sasuke stays on the ground, so if you want to do an air combo, you gotta jump up and follow your opponent. And one of those unlockable characters is the freaking frogs that Jiraiya uses for Sage Mode. I have never seen them as playable characters. And there's one more game mode, which is the special missions. Each character has a bingo book, and each mission gives you a certain number of stamps. Once you fill up a line or the entire thing, the character gets a new ability. And this ability is something you can replace with your current jutsu on the touchscreen. These abilities can be new jutsu or simply buffs. So there's even some character customization here. The missions have some special conditions. Sometimes you need to defeat an opponent without using normal attacks. Sometimes you gotta collect items. Sometimes you gotta survive in a pitch black stage. There are some cool game modes here, but honestly not enough variety for the number of missions and characters the game asks you to clear. Even just doing the first character, I saw duplicate missions immediately. But if you want to sit through the gauntlet and unlock everything, you can expect to spend hours in this game mode. But I wouldn't say it has that much content, since a lot of the missions are duplicates. I really just want to play this game in multiplayer. Some stages are a bit lame, but the fighting system itself is so much fun. That said, a fighting game like this needs a practice mode, where we can explore the full potential of each character and maybe even try out different builds. That's something I definitely missed with this title. And although I love that each character plays differently, you can definitely feel that some are just more powerful than others. Not sure how much attention went into the game balance there. I never thought I'd say this about a Ninja Council game, but I'm ranking this at C. And that's putting it above a bunch of Ultimate Ninjas and a couple of Storm and Clash of Ninja games. But that's just how much I liked it. This game is a little gem that perhaps didn't get the recognition it deserved. And after that nice surprise, it's time for disappointment. We'll be right back. Next time someone accuses me of clickbait, I'm gonna say, well, that's still not as bad as what Bandai did to the entirety of Japan. Let me break it down for you. The PlayStation 2 Ultimate Ninja games were called Narutime Hero in Japan. That's how the first 3 games were called. When we get to Ultimate Ninja 4, the games went from Naruto to Naruto Shippuden, and in Japan, those games changed title too, from Narutime Hero to Narutime Axeru. So Ultimate Ninja 4 was Axeru, and Ultimate Ninja 5 was Axeru 2. So far, so good. This game we're gonna review today was called Axel 3 in Japan, which would be the same as calling it Ultimate Ninja 6 over here in the West. But let me tell you, this is not a sequel to Ultimate Ninja 5. Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 takes a lot of the Heroes 2 formula, giving you a board with different squares, each one of them with an event for you to clear in order to progress the story. So as you can clearly see, there's no open world, there's no free roaming, and the combat system, even though it has some new stuff, it is not an evolution from Ultimate Ninja 5. So this definitely does not feel like a sequel to that. Biggest clickbait I've ever seen in my life. And this one costs you money. I mean, even for a sequel to Heroes 2, they cut a lot of stuff off, because these squares are basically just battles or side-scrolling levels. The side-scrolling levels are definitely new and we'll talk more about them, but what happened to the tree climbing minigames, or the poses, or the quizzes? All that stuff that was in Heroes 2 was scrapped, and progressing through these levels is actually repetitive as hell. Something that those minigames could have helped with. The side-scrolling levels feel novel at the very least. It's something we've never been able to enjoy in an Ultimate Ninja game. There are usually different objectives. Sometimes you gotta defeat opponents, others you have to destroy objects, and others you just gotta get to the finish line. It's a novel concept that I appreciated for the variety it brought to these levels, because without them, it would just be a series of battles. And this game would be even more boring. But that novelty also wears out pretty fast, especially when they make you play the exact same level over and over. There actually aren't that many side-scrolling levels, the game just makes you repeat them a bunch of times. That said, this is the first time on a PSP Ultimate Ninja that we're actually playing the Naruto Shippuden story. And the game covers a decent chunk of Shippuden, going from Naruto returning to the village all the way to his fight against Kakuzu. And that's when the game just couldn't resist and introduces you to a filler arc. In typical Naruto filler fashion, this group of villains has a vendetta against Konoha, and through some mysterious jutsu that they just made up on the spot, they're gonna summon a demon that looks like a tree and suck the entire village's chakra. 3 villains versus the entire Leaf Village, and they had to resort to Naruto and Sasuke teaming up to take down the final boss. By the way, one of those villains is actually Sonic.
Whoa, not bad. I'm impressed.
Now it's your turn!
I don't know about that.
No joke, that is actually Sonic's voice actor. The entire game is voiced in Japanese and English, but for some reason, changing it to English during the filler arcs just makes it funnier for me. It eases my suffering. And to be fair, if it wasn't for this filler, we wouldn't have a single boss fight in the entire game. And you guys already know what Naruto's gonna do. He's gonna clean his clock. Yeah, I still don't know what that means. And when we finally take down the boss, we roll credits. And there's still 2 chapters remaining? We get to play as Sasuke now, putting his team together? We're gonna form up Heavy and hunt down Itachi, aren't we? Nope, you form Heavy and you play the filler again, but this time from Sasuke's perspective. And let me tell you, it doesn't change much. But then the final chapter finally has Sasuke chasing Itachi and he finds him and you fight. But turns out that was just a warm-up. Itachi says, we'll finish this later, and credits roll. What the hell just happened? They didn't even finish that arc. Why introduce it at all? Now, there's a lot of fighting in this story, so we gotta talk about the battle system and how it changed. This whole game seems to have been built with a new feature in mind, a feature that unfortunately I wasn't able to try out, and that's co-op. Most of the missions during story mode can be played with some other player, but as you can imagine, that's not the easiest thing for me to do nowadays. That said, I think the combat system just got a lot worse thanks to this change. The controls have become clunkier. You can now run past opponents in battle, completely missing attacks, and even attack the opposite side, because the game features a lot of 2v1 and 2v2 encounters. So they made it more flexible on where you want to attack, because you might have an opponent on each side. But in this battle system, that just results in a lot of attacks going where you don't want them to go. They removed the grab, which had never been done in Ultimate Ninja, precisely because if you hold back and attack, you attack towards the opposite side. And I think that just makes the game worse. You've got even more busted hitboxes on characters like Hidan and Kakuzu, but hey, Ultimate Ninja games are party games and I've made my peace with that. There was a time that I thought they were more competitive than the Storm games. This whole journey in the ranking of Naruto games, looking back at Ultimate Ninjas, has completely changed my mind on that. But hey, not every change was bad. Every character has a unique awakening that gives them some sort of special ability. Hidan, for instance, creates a circle on the ground and can stab himself to deal damage to an opponent no matter where they are. They added a chakra dash, probably influenced by the Storm games. I don't think Ultimate Ninja needed it, but hey, it's there if you want to use it. And the ultimate animations are still excellent, especially considering this game is running on a PSP. And even though they removed Team Ultimates, you now have Link Jutsu when you're close to one of your teammates, depending on the character combination you have. But at the end of the day, it's still an Ultimate Ninja game with infinite substitutions, and that just makes it incredibly frustrating to play in higher difficulties, because your opponent will always substitute 1 or 2 hits into the combo. And when you're outnumbered, these battles can be a nightmare. And while some of these harder battles are optional, they also unlock characters in case you want to have the full roster. Did I do those optional missions to unlock the full roster? Yeah, because me, I guess. Here's the full roster unlocked. 16 hours of playtime. To their credits, it's got some characters that I've never seen before in a Naruto game. They've got 3 different paths of pain, instead of the one that we're just used to. There's also this version of Kabuto. You usually only get human Kabuto or Sage mode, but you don't see this half step very often. Other than that, the progression is a bit lackluster. The things you can unlock are Jutsu, if you just want to take a character and change the Jutsu they take into battle, and Tactics, which are buffs that you activate before a battle, and you're definitely gonna need those at higher difficulties. You've got some wallpapers, some still images, but compared to previous Ultimate Ninja games where you had ultimate animations, full 3D models, this is a bit lackluster. It's a major step back as far as Ultimate Ninja games go, but since we didn't get clickbaited like Japan did, the downgrade isn't as big. Still, coming from Heroes 2 that had all kinds of different events throughout the levels, I think removing those was definitely a mistake, and made the story mode an absolute drag to get through. Maybe it was better with co-op, but unfortunately it's been over 10 years since its release, and that's not something we have readily readily available. All in all, I think this was a bad game. We're gonna rank it at E. Not even as good as Akatsuki Rising, but given the full voice acting, ultimate animations, and the sliver of progression it has, it's still gonna rank above all of those DS games. Ninja Council games have been very painful throughout this journey, most of them ranking at the bottom. But the last entry changed the formula quite a bit. Shinobi Rumble is, in my opinion, the most underrated game in Naruto history. I had a really good time with that one. So, did they keep their momentum going with this last entry? No. They went back to the side-scroller formula. This is Naruto Shippuden 3D, a new era. Why is it called 3D? Because it came out on the 3DS. Remember when every 3DS game had 3D in the title? Graphics have been updated. They even went through the trouble of updating some of the classic Ninja Council enemies, the wolves and the spiders. It's been 8 games. Naruto is still fighting wolves and spiders. Why? And is the game actually 3D though? Well, it tilts a little bit. Look, it's not just a side scroller. It's tilted. This game plays really bad. Combat is worse than ever before. Enemies don't get staggered as often, which means you gotta guess when they're gonna attack. And you don't have a block button, so you constantly have to attack and do a backflip, which isn't always possible while platforming. Naruto is the only playable character this time, a massive step back for the series, which always had multiple playable characters. And when you start the game, Naruto's combo is just 2 attacks. That's it. 1, 2. You can throw a Rasengan if you want, but his combo is 2 attacks. What the hell? And doing special moves like the Rasengan can actually be dangerous, as some enemies, particularly bosses, will just tank your special or ultimate, and they'll take the damage, but they'll also attack through it, and usually deal more damage to you than you deal to them, which just promotes this playstyle of hit and run. The story starts with Naruto training in Mount Myoboku, learning Sage Mode, when he receives a message from Kakashi saying that it's urgent that he returns to the village. Alright, we're kicking things off with Pain. Nice. Good point to start the game. Nope, it's an original story, where someone's making puppets out of all the Kage and making every village go to war with each other. And of course, no one can tell that the Kage are puppets now until Naruto gets there, because he is the wisest ninja that ever lived. The game actually has some pretty cool cutscenes and some attempts at humor while telling the story, and there are also quick time events using the gyroscope. Ultimates look awesome too. In terms of cinematics, this game was way better than I expected, but playing it just sucks. There's no reason to fight any of the enemies in any level, so just feel free to skip them. What matters the most is collecting scrolls and medals. That is how you upgrade your character, so Naruto can actually do more than 2 attacks in a combo. These upgrades between levels actually feel very meaningful, so character progression is nice, but that's only the case because you start with nothing. This is the video game equivalent of this DLC should have been in the base game, because yeah, Naruto should have been able to string more than 2 attacks together in a combo from the very start. You also have a Sage Mode transformation that lasts very little time, but that gives you increased damage and some new specials. That said, you still take a ton of damage if a boss decides to power through it. So at the end of the day, the transformation doesn't really do much for you. The story develops, you find out who's behind it, and it's a female ninja called Malice. A bit on the nose there. Why is she doing this? For revenge. Revenge on who? All the ninja in the world. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. You keep fighting through different levels, all of them with a Kage boss fight at the end, and to their credit, they did make every boss unique, with a bunch of moves for you to learn and dodge. You gotta applaud the effort, even if they didn't make any of those fights fun. A lot of them were cheap as hell, but hey, they tried. You can also pick up to 3 assists when you start a level. Assists come in and attack your opponents on a cooldown, but they also can help you clear some environmental obstacles. You actually have to bring the right assist to a mission if you want to collect all of those medals, which is what you use to upgrade the number of hits in a combo, for instance. Which means this game has the exact same problem that past Ninja Council games had, which is you never know which barriers you're gonna run into when you start a new level. So you have no idea who you should take, which forces you to replay the level as if getting through it once wasn't painful enough. Oh, and Malice, turns out she was mad at the world because her kid died in the war. That's it, that's the story. She revives the kid, he turns into a giant puppet. Where have I seen this before? And she begs you for help. The end. What a major step back this was. It's like they went back to the formula that made a ton of bad games in the past, revamped the graphics, cut off a bunch of features, and shipped it. This was the last game published by Takara Tomy. What a bad note to leave on. Yeah, this is a bad game. Still not as bad as Ninja Council 2 or 3, so we're gonna place it at the top of F tier. Welcome to the bottom, buddy. Gotta shake that off and move on to bigger and better things. It's time to check out the game you guys have been asking for. Welcome to Ultimate Ninja Impact. You know what? You guys tend to overhype games sometimes, but this time, Finally, Ultimate Ninja Impact takes the Ultimate Ninja formula and makes it a simplified Warriors type game with a lot of mechanics taken from Storm. In fact, this game came out only a year after Storm 2, which becomes evident when you listen to the soundtrack, because most of it is indeed the Storm 2 soundtrack. So the basic structure is that you take one of the playable characters and fight through hundreds of enemies to get to your objective. Sometimes your objective is fighting another character, sometimes you have to escort or protect someone, but it's a concept that's fairly easy to understand as we've seen it many times before. There's a whole genre around this concept. It's called Muso. But what sets this game apart for me personally is the combo system. If you mash the attack button, you get a combo, and at any point during your combo, you can hit triangle, the chakra button, to unleash a jutsu. And the jutsu is different depending on when you press that button. Some jutsu are for dealing high damage, others are for hitting a wide area. You've also got launchers and ground bounces. It allows for so much creativity when fighting other characters. These jutsu are all different depending on the character you pick, and so are the basic combos. Sakura punches really slow but punches very hard. Sasuke has wider range to his attacks because of his sword, and he basically gets a re-jump combo for free if you just mash. Sasuke is easy mode. In addition to that, every character has an awakening, which some awakenings are very unique, like transformations that change your entire moveset, and they all have ultimate attacks too. And even though this was a game on the PSP, CyberConnect 2 still delivered the hype in these cutscenes. Well, technically this game was also developed by Rakjin, so I don't really know who made the ultimates, but they look very CyberConnect. Now, that's how this game is played no matter the game mode, and the combat is one of the big reasons why I like it. But this game is not without its problems. Let's talk about story mode. Story mode covers a lot, from the start of Shippuden until the end of the 5 Kage Summit, when Naruto and Sasuke fight. And you actually end the game by playing that final mission from each character's perspective, with a unique cutscene after the credits for each one of them. Credits that you cannot skip, so you gotta watch them twice. Unskippable credits in a game built to be finished twice. Come on, guys. You move through story mode by moving through this board, similar to the Ultimate Ninja Hero series. Sometimes you have a simple conversation cutscene, which calling it a cutscene is a stretch, it's a visual novel again. Or sometimes you'll play through a level, which will have different objectives, like the ones I mentioned before. These boards are a lot more dynamic, a lot more handcrafted, with secrets and unlockables to discover, and as you play story mode, you'll unlock characters, and they are the key to removing some of these obstacles, which will lead you to finding some money, which you can then spend on cards. There's a whole card system. Each character can equip 4 different cards, and most of them usually work as buffs. Very minor buffs like more chakra, bigger ninjutsu damage, attack, defense, but some of them not only have better buffs, they can even change your jutsu or your ultimate or your awakening. So these cards can also be used for character customization, and I think it's a pretty awesome system. That said, I was not expecting to buy cards from the shop, spending in-game currency to get random cards, and from the very start, I got duplicates. And it's so annoying if you're trying to unlock everything. Why do you get duplicates? Naruto loot boxes, this is where they were born, folks. Very first card pack that I bought, supposed to have 5 cards in it. 3 of them were duplicates. What the hell? That said, this was the first Naruto game on the PSP that has received the proper story mode treatment. The treatment that we look for in CyberConnect 2 games. You have a few cutscenes with quick time events, some cool boss fights with unique mechanics. All of it is voice acted in Japanese and in English. It's awesome. The full story takes about 12 hours to finish, even more if you want to fully explore these boards, but just beating the story is enough to unlock every character. A total of 27 characters are available, each one of them with a unique moveset, except the 3 Sasukes. They all play very similar. This game has 3 Sasukes and only 2 Narutos. I've never seen that before. Story takes you to very different backgrounds. They are visually distinct, though I would say maybe because this was the PSP, the draw distance is a bit short. Enemies aren't visible until you're really close to them, and that's a bit annoying. And so far so good. I said I was going to talk about downsides and I haven't done it yet. The time has come. Here we go. The story mode, even though it is only 12 hours long and it covers so many arcs, it does have a lot of padding. Some of these missions could definitely be skipped, and they pad them out so hard that it gets really repetitive and annoying. For instance, Naruto has to train his chakra nature, so Kakashi is like, yo Naruto, make some clones, defeat 100 of them. Okay, that's a drag, but we power through. After all, that's what his training was like. He made some shadow clones and fought against them. Finally beat all of them, and Kakashi goes, okay, now do 200. What the why? There are plenty of grindy missions, and they're usually okay if the game makes you play with a new character, because playing a new character means discovering their moveset, discovering new combos, exploring the character to its fullest. But when it's a grindy mission with a character that we've already played a few missions with, it's just boring. It's like Ultimate Ninja Impact is a good game until it remembers that it's a Muso. And it's for this reason that the other game modes simply don't shine as much as story mode. You have some extra missions with a similar format. It's either defeating bosses, defeating enemies, or keeping a combo going. The good thing here is that you can select which character you want to play as, so you can even select some characters that are not available in story mode, such as the entire Akatsuki. But the missions themselves are nothing to write home about. You also have tag missions, which are the ones that you can play in co-op if you had another friend with a PSP and a copy of the game. And that does sound fun, but in 2021, I can't really test that feature anymore. I had a ton of fun playing Impact. This is a series that was definitely worth exploring, but unfortunately, this would be the last game to come out on PSP, and the company never moved on to explore the Vita, so this was the first and last Impact game, unfortunately. It definitely had potential to be a lot more, but it's still one of the best Naruto games that I've played in this series. Looking at the current ranking, definitely think this is a B rank game, only held back by the PSP limitations and its Muso nature. But given how cool the combat is, I'm gonna rank this above Ultimate Ninja 3. I think the free roaming of Ultimate Ninja 4 is really strong, so that is gonna keep it above. But hey, we got another good Naruto game added to the list, so I really cannot complain. This was a fantastic journey. The last Naruto game that came out on the 3DS. It's a 2D beat 'em up inspired by the Rock Lee spin-off, so it utilizes the chibi art style, and the whole thing is just very, very humorous. This is by far the funniest Naruto game I've ever played. Sasuke, you've already taken out Itachi, right? Why won't you leave it now and come back? Itachi was being used by the Leaf Village. Toby told me everything about the appalling Anbu working conditions. That working 20 hours in a day was normal, with no overtime pay, no union, no bonuses. By the time I came to fight Itachi, he had already been totally worn down, broken long ago by his slave-driving masters. I think the masked man's lying to you. By comparison, just look at the Akatsuki. They promise 500% interest per annum on your initial investment. This is in the game. I mean, I had to voice it because the game isn't voiced, but this is the actual game's writing. The story covers some of the Shippuden arcs, starting with Naruto getting back to the village, all the way to fighting Sasuke after he defeated Itachi, with the post-credits going into the training section with Killer Bee, so a decent chunk of the story. But it's not like you'll be reliving the whole story, it's a very abridged version, and completely rewritten in a comedic style. When training against Kakashi to get the bells, once you're done with the mission, he mentions having developed a new technique. Now, we Naruto fans know that he's talking about the Kamui, but Naruto imagines a whole other thing. Let's just say that's probably not Kakashi's new jutsu. You travel to the sand and defeat Deidara to rescue Gaara, who, as it turns out, was just taking a nap the whole time. He's been so busy with Kazekage work that he only got 2 hours of sleep last night.
Do you know how hard it is to go through the day with only 2 hours of sleep?
And then Pain goes and destroys the Leaf Village, and you know what? You're not ready for Pain. Not yet. Now, since this is based on the Rock Lee spin-off, you don't just play as Naruto, you also play as Rock Lee. Each character has their own board where each space is a level, and sometimes the next level will be locked. So you need to jump between the 2 boards to grab some keys so you can unlock the next mission. Rock Lee's story barely touches the Shippuden canon. It happens in parallel, and it's much more of an original story, if you can even call it that. Each mission feels like its own separate skit. For instance, Tenten is upset by something. Rock Lee assumes that she's having love problems, and assumes that she's in love with Guy Sensei. A horrible picture that none of us needed to see. The combat is very decent for a game of this genre. There are 2 attack buttons so you can create combos. You have attacks on the ground, attacks in the air. You can dash either for movement or to cancel attack buttons and extend combos that way. And you have your ultimates too. The whole thing feels very fluid. Rock Lee also has the 8 gates mode pretty much from the start of the game, while Naruto gets his Sage mode towards the late game. And I cannot believe that they actually put QB mode in, but only after the credits. It plays so different. I mean, look at Naruto zooming around, but yeah, this is post-game content. How insane is that? You unlock assists as you play. Some are tied to the Shippuden story. For instance, you get Sai and Yamato when you go to the Tenchi Bridge mission, where Sai betrays you and gives Danzo's love letter to Orochimaru, and others you just unlock by getting experience. The missions themselves are pretty straightforward. You either beat waves of enemies, stop them from crossing a line. There are also side-scrolling levels where you gotta get to the finish line before the time runs out, and you have a decent number of boss fights as well. Though in my opinion, the combat system doesn't really provide for great boss battles. But there are some good attempts at mission variety. In the end though, there's still a lot of repetition, unfortunately. Beating these missions gives you experience. It may also unlock some new abilities for both Rock Lee and Naruto. Some will be actual ultimates, others will probably be jokes, like Lee throwing his eyebrows instead of shuriken. They even explain how it works. Lee is using the 8 gates to grow his eyebrows even faster so he can then rip them out and throw them at the enemies. Game takes about 6 hours to roll credits on both Naruto and Rock Lee's boards, with another 2 hours of post-game content complete with an endless mode and a boss fight rush on top of that. And I'd say that's plenty of content for the 3DS game. This is hands down the funniest Naruto game I've ever played, and I've played almost all of them. Combat is decent and there are some fun and unique levels. That said, it's still slightly repetitive and the boss fights are not very fun with this combat system. Oh right, Pain. Your history, Pain! But the Leaf Village is no more. I have an idea. Leave everything to me.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
Something appeared. Who is this? This is an acquaintance of mine, Mr. Demon. You finally crossed the line in terms of ignoring the source material. Surely!
Make your wish, whatever it is, I shall make it come true.
Put the Hidden Leaf Village back to how it was before.
No trouble at all. There. Anyone can make a wish, I presume. Then destroy the Hidden Leaf Village. There.
No, do what I say. Put it back.
I can do this forever. Destroy the Leaf Village.
Put the village back.
Time for a different tactic. Demon, give me your powers.
Pain disappeared?
Because he took on my powers, he has been sent to the Demon Dispatch Agency. There, he will work forever for the agency, being dispatched wherever they see fit.
And that's how Konoha got saved from Pain. How can you not love this? B rank. The game itself isn't anything special, but this writing alone deserves its own award. It's a game that goes for funny and nails it. Do you know how hard that is? And at the same time, it's not bad at everything else, it's just decent. No regrets, this is a very good game. This next one is not a good game. I've been looking forward to this one because apparently a lot of people played it. This is Naruto Shippuden Kizuna Drive. Why is it so popular? It's really bad. Basically, it is a 3D beat 'em up where you have two attack buttons. One of them punches and the other one throws jutsu. Depending on where you throw the jutsu in your combo, it might be a different jutsu. So at first, it kinda sounds like Ultimate Ninja Impact, except you don't have any of the cool launchers or ground bounces. The most you can do is splat an opponent into a wall to extend a combo. And it all feels so janky. It's not satisfying to pull any of these off. Even the attack animations don't look great. Pair that up with clunky movement and the whole thing just feels bad. There's no block button. All you can do defensively is to try to dodge around. There's a jump button that is incredibly useless. And the reason why there's not a lot of buttons for a lot of functions is because both shoulder buttons are dedicated to the camera. And let me tell you, moving around while panning the camera with the shoulder buttons is very uncomfortable. The game doesn't even have a lock-on system. Now, you don't just play as Naruto, there's a decent number of playable characters, but if you pick Sakura, for instance, instead of a combo, she only does 2 punches. She feels like an unfinished character, and she's not the only one that feels that way. The game has a unique mechanic, which the game is titled after, and that's the Kizuna Drive, which you can see at the top of the screen. As you defeat enemies, the drive fills up, and if you finish a mission with a full drive, you get more rewards by the end of it. This drive is used whenever you want to revive a teammate, and the best way to increase it is by stunning an enemy and going into this Naruto Pong minigame, where you just bounce an enemy between your buddies. It's hilarious. But it's also the reason why I quit this game before I finished it. In this entire ranking, there's only been one game so far that I have refused to finish, and that was Ninja Council 3. Kizuna Drive is the second game in this entire ranking where I'm simply saying no, I'm not doing this, and here's why. When you launch the game, you get 2 options. You can play scenario missions, which is story mode, or free missions that work as side missions with different objectives. But this is a game built for co-op. Difficulty-wise, it does not adjust to you playing solo, it's always 4-player difficulty, which means to beat story missions, you actually have to grind free missions so you can get better scrolls. There's no level up system in this game, all you have are these scrolls with passive effects. You equip the scrolls on your characters and that's how you get more health or more damage, for instance. I was stuck in a story mission that had me fight against a Shukaku, but as you can see, I was simply not dealing enough damage. That health bar is barely moving no matter where I throw at it. This means that I need better scrolls, so I started grinding free missions until I reached this one where the objective is to fill up your Kizuna Drive. I cannot fill up my Kizuna Drive if my AI companions keep dying. Without my entire team alive, I cannot go into this ping pong minigame, which is the best way to increase the Kizuna Drive. So if one of them falls, I have to revive them, and if I revive them, I am spending that resource. They keep dying to the dumbest shit imaginable. They will simply not dodge enemy attacks. So I played this mission like 3 different times and I quit. I knew this was the first of many problems, of many barriers that I was gonna run into with with this game. It's a game that wants you to grind these free missions, this mode that looks like side content, for you to beat the actual story missions. Pair that up with the actual gameplay not being fun, and I simply didn't want to go through them. But in the ranking of Naruto games, we have to be fair, and we have to look at all the aspects that a game brings. And there's a chance that the story of this game might be able to save it. So I looked up the entire story on YouTube. I really like the cutscenes in this game. They are mostly still images, but the effects they gave these images make the cutscenes feel exciting. Unlike the effects during gameplay, which are completely out of balance, like why do these dogs bark so much louder than any other sound in the game?
影分身の術それ
The story starts with Naruto slapping a tag on his face, transforming into the Ninetales, and destroying the hidden Dream Village. Now, obviously, we know something's wrong because Naruto wouldn't just do that. But the plot revolves around the hidden Dream Village wanting revenge on Konoha. And I say let them have it, because they have the coolest ninja headbands I have ever seen in this universe. So is the story good? It's okay. There is actually a very cool twist. When the villain is revealed, I totally did not see that coming. But it also leans on a lot of the same themes we've seen over and over in Naruto stories, especially filler stuff like the villain saying your bonds are your weakness and Naruto going no, they're the thing that give me strength. So it's not an awesome story, but it did have its moments. This is a bad game with an alright story. They didn't adjust the difficulty for solo play, which made the optional side missions something you have to get through. And with the AI being as bad as it is, it's an absolute nightmare. And I would actually be willing to power through it if the combat was good, but even that part of the game sucks. This is gonna be an E rank, right above Ultimate Ninja Heroes, but I don't think it's better than Naruto Shippuden Ninja Destiny 2, so it's pretty bad. But on the bright side, this means that we're almost done, as we rank the final Naruto game, Naruto to Boruto Shinobi Striker. Striker? Strikers? It's Striker, but the community still isn't sure. This is one of those games that got an insanely mixed reaction, and rightfully so. There's a lot of things it does well and a lot of things it doesn't. It's not the type of Naruto game that everyone wanted, but it's one that grew over time with content updates and balance patches, and has managed to not only captivate an active community, it has become one of the best-selling Naruto games of all time, on the same level as a few Storm games. But how did such a controversial game come to have such a success, and where does it rank on our Naruto games tier list? Welcome to the final episode of the Ranking of Naruto Games! Shinobi Striker had big shoes to fill. Fans were coming off of Naruto Storm 4, currently the best Naruto game in our ranking, and they were looking at what was gonna be the next step for Naruto. Shinobi Striker was a huge departure from the Storm formula, so naturally a lot of fans were disappointed by the type of game it was. No matter how good or bad it would turn out to be, it just wasn't what they were looking for. And that's despite having a feature that fans have been looking forward to for a very long time: character creation. Shinobi Striker lets you create your own ninja, and over time you can unlock thousands of customization items and make your ninja stand out as someone truly unique. You would also unlock jutsu to customize your loadout and fill in one of the 4 shinobi roles: attack, ranged, defense, or heal type. The customization in Shinobi Striker is phenomenal. It borrows a lot of elements from Dragon Ball Xenoverse, but the abilities you can equip are often much more unique, both visually and gameplay wise. There just aren't that many duplicates. And speaking of gameplay, I think Shinobi Striker's concept is amazing, and the game plays really well. Moving around is awesome with all the ninja stuff you'd want to do. You got big jumps, wall running, you can pull yourself to walls with a wire kunai. They basically made you Naruto ninjas with a grappling hook. And then combat wise, you have attack combos with movesets that change depending on the weapon you have equipped. You got a ninja tool that you can also choose for your loadout, the jutsu you equipped, the ultimate, and a substitution jutsu with a long cooldown to get you out of a hairy situation. All of that was really well done in my opinion, and it's a game like no other. The gameplay is so unique, there's no other game that I can reference to say, you know what, Shinobi Striker kinda plays like that. It's a unique balance of movement, positioning, and melee combat that I just have never seen before. Which means that so far, so good. The problems began after that. If the gameplay was good and you were happy with the ninja you made, was there any content to enjoy any of this? Well, in short, there's a mission mode that you can play solo or in co-op, and there's competitive multiplayer. Let's start with the mission mode. This is where you can do various missions, most of them consisting of beating up groups of enemies with the occasional boss fight. There are some missions that are more unique than others, but overall this game mode doesn't offer a ton of variety, and most of it is not that fun. You can start playing these missions solo, and that's actually part of the progression early on, but later missions, while technically still possible to complete solo, they're gonna require a team thanks to their difficulty, which does not scale no matter how many team members you have available. And before you know it, the missions are over. This mission list may look very long, but a lot of these are duplicate missions. You've done them before, they're just slightly more difficult now. So mission mode felt lacking to a lot of people, especially those looking
looking forward to a crafted story experience like they had in Storm. But there was a reason why this mission mode was lacking, and that was competitive multiplayer. This was the star of the show. This was the main game. Mission mode was almost treated as a side mode, even though you needed to complete a lot of missions to unlock some of the jutsu. Competitive multiplayer, however, released with 4 different game modes. Combat battle, where each team has a set number of lives, and the goal is to deplete those by knocking out enemy ninja. It's this game's team deathmatch. Base battle, where both teams fight to control 3 strategic points on the map. Flag battle, which is a capture the flag game mode. And barrier battle, the game mode that is universally hated. One team defends the giant frog while the other team attempts to take it down. Fighting the frog is really not fun. A lot of people simply quit when they see this game mode popping up. Still, it's a nice collection of game modes, but unfortunately even this mode was lacking in content, as it only featured 5 stages. Now, if you combine those 5 stages with the 4 different game modes, that leads to about 20 different combinations, which the development team might have thought, wow, that's a lot. It really wasn't. Very quickly, players felt like they ran out of content. Even though there was a ton of jutsu and cosmetics left to unlock, the gameplay loop got repetitive really fast, simply because this number of stages wasn't enough. And it didn't help that the game made it extremely difficult to play with friends. You can set up a party and queue for a match, but if you want to play against your friends, there are no custom lobbies that allow this. Naruto games are famous for their clan battles, a team of ninja against a team of rival ninja. And this was the perfect game to facilitate that. But if you party up, you're just gonna go on matchmaking and find a team to play against. You cannot match against your friends or rivals. And this is probably what hurt the game the most. It just wasn't a content-rich game, so it got old really fast. It had everything in place to thrive competitively, but without a way to set up games between 2 teams and no way to spectate those matches, it made things a bit tricky. Which is why I really applaud the efforts of Fleaboy Jetson, who still to this day will host competitive Shinobi Striker tournaments on his Twitch. And the competitive scene is pretty damn cool to follow. Make sure to check it out if you have the chance. But ultimately, this is one tournament organizer and a competitive scene actively fighting against the game's systems in order to make this possible. Everything the community has tried to do with Shinobi Striker, it always felt like the game was just actively fighting against it. This game's saving grace was the DLC. They supported the hell out of it, with balance patches that kept the meta changing and introducing new jutsu with their DLC characters. This is something that made the game feel fresh with every new release. However, a new character with a few new jutsu can only do so much for the game. So about a week after a DLC comes out, everyone is back to their same old content void that is Shinobi Striker. There was an update though that was the absolute best thing they could have done, which was the addition of Survival Exercise. This brought a new game mode to be played exclusively on a brand new map, the Chunin Exams Arena. And it's a free-for-all game mode, no teams this time, which was a huge departure from other game modes, and it quickly became a fan favorite. Turns out all people wanted was to fight against each other, without any silly goals like capturing a flag or a base. This update was incredible, and maybe something they should have invested more in. But alas, this was the only game mode ever added to Shinobi Striker, and the only map for that matter. They kept up the DLC characters and the balance patches. Support for this game was definitely good, and it has lasted for a really long time. As of making this video, we're at the end of Season 4 of DLC. That's a total of 28 characters over the course of 3.5 years. Coming in steadily and always with a balance patch. Not a lot of games get this kind of support. In fact, none of the games in our ranking have gotten this kind of support ever. Sure, times are different, and this is a different type of game that perhaps demands this a bit more than others, but it's still something that we need to acknowledge and recognize. However, maybe their efforts were a little bit misplaced. Character hype will last for about a week, while a new stage would be a bigger and more lasting change. At the end of the day, Naruto Shinobi Striker is a game that's very easy to get sick of, because after a few hours, you've seen everything there is to see. If you can stay motivated because you want to get better and climb the ranks for a couple of rewards at the end of the season, that's great, but you're gonna be doing the same stuff over and over. And this is why I love Shinobi Striker, but only in small bursts. Coming back to the game with every DLC is the perfect dose for me, but I could never make this a game that I play on a daily basis. There just isn't enough there for me. Even if I have an infinite number of loadouts to try, that's simply not enough if there isn't a bigger variety of content to explore. It's a very unique game with an excellent customization system that has been supported for a really long time, and we actually don't know if they're done releasing characters at this point. However, there's a clear clear lack of content, especially in the maps department. Mission mode is extremely mediocre, and it still lacks basic online features like custom lobbies. Given what the game has achieved and taking into account all of its shortcomings, I think it's fair to rank this game at B. A very high B, but where exactly depends on personal preference. Storm 2 and Rise of a Ninja are mostly there for single player, and this is a multiplayer first game, which makes it very hard to compare. But since this is my list, I'm gonna rank it anyway, so I'll rank it above Naruto Broken Bond. I really hate the filler in that story.
7 years after the release of Naruto Storm 4, 7 years after confirming that would be their last Naruto game, CyberConnect 2 launched the sequel and everyone wished they didn't. Naruto Storm Connections had one of the worst receptions that I remember in anime game history, the most disappointing game of 2023, but now we're at the end of Season 1 of DLC, so it's time to look back at how this game launched and how it improved. Naruto Storm Connections is easily one of the most hated Naruto games in history, mostly because it launched in a state that was missing a lot of features. And if we look at the series as a whole, it felt like a Storm 4 DLC, mainly because it lacked a big flagship innovation. Storm 2 had its amazing story mode. Generations added the substitution bar. Storm 3 had instant awakenings, not you. Storm 4 added leader switching, and now Connections added what? Simple controls? In reality, Storm Connections changed a lot compared to Storm 4. They added combo scaling, reworked a lot of combos to give players more combo freedom, gave a second jutsu to all characters, which meant everyone also has 2 assists now, even if it did replace everyone's tilt move, and made counterattacks essentially free. In total, more than 50 changes were made from Storm 4 to Connections, but the ones I just mentioned are probably the biggest ones. So you can understand how this felt like a big gameplay systems patch rather than a full new game that you must buy at full price. Something similar can be said about its roster, because while this game was advertised as having the biggest Naruto roster ever, the truth is it was just Naruto Storm 4 plus 10 new characters. So technically they weren't lying, but also all it took was 10 new characters. I mean, even now, after a full season of DLC, we only have 15 new characters that weren't playable in Storm 4. And on top of that, it launched lacking a massive feature: you couldn't play with your friends online. Imagine releasing a game in 2023 without a way to invite your friends to play. It was ranked matches or unranked matches against random opponents only. And to be fair, they did release lobbies only 2 months later, but in gamer years, that might as well be a decade. So the reputation for this game was already set in stone. And not being able to invite friends wasn't the game's only problem online. Despite having years of player feedback and requests to penalize players for rage quitting, at launch there were no penalties at all. And so rage quits were very abundant. But like most things in this game, it took them a while, but they finally implemented some penalties. If you rage quit now, you get straight up a temporary ban from playing online depending on how often you quit, along with some ranked points penalty. That should have been there at launch for sure, but I'm happy it got patched in at some point. And in a way, that's what makes the Storm Connections story even sadder, because by the time all of that stuff got fixed, players had already made their mind up about the game. It became cool to hate on Naruto Storm Connections, and some of that hate is clearly justified. I mean, the game was rushed, it was launched incomplete, but I also think this game actually has the best netcode in the entire Storm series, which makes it the best Storm game to play online today, and that's something that people don't want to admit. If you remember the previous ranking episodes, on every single Storm title, you would see bad netcode amongst the downsides. It was easily my biggest gripe with the series, but for this game, CC2 finally said, fine, we give up. And that's why you see Microsoft's Azure PlayFab every time you boot the game up. Not only that, but something Connections has over all the previous Storm games is balanced patches and DLC updates. The state the game launched in was way worse than the state the game is in right now. Storm 4 competitive, you may look back at it with rose-tinted glasses, half of that roster is banned in tournaments. For Naruto Storm Connections, that's not the case. I mean, currently people think we should ban a couple of characters. I mean, puppet users and pre-time skip Naruto seems to be a problem. But this is something that has changed over the course of different metas, different balance patches. It is constantly evolving. And in my opinion, this is why they try to resell you essentially what was the same game as Naruto Storm 4. They built this one to last, to get updated over time. So in their minds, it was fine to just resell you the same game because this one was going to get a lot better over time. And everyone loves Storm 4. So why not make Storm 4 the long-lasting Naruto experience? I think that's what they should have done with Storm 4, not a new title. Because I think players also people wanted that. They wanted the long-lasting Naruto experience. They just didn't want to pay for the same base game again. That said, I am reviewing this game today after an entire season has been released, and I think I can safely say that between the netcode, the balance patches, and the lobbies, which still crash a lot admittedly, but are the best that a Storm series has ever seen, this is my favorite online multiplayer Storm game. If I had to pick a Storm game to play nothing but online for the rest of my life, I would pick Connections in a heartbeat. And that is kind of a specific request, but it's still something that a lot of players just do. They just boot up the game and go online, and I think this is the best one to do that with. And I'm not saying the netcode is good, but at least it's not gonna go on the downsides this time. It's good enough to not get mentioned, I guess. Congrats, CC2, you finally achieved mid netcode. But it's not only my favorite because of those objectively very good points that I just made, I also may have forgotten how to play the previous games. I made fun of the simple controls, but the truth is, I got so used to them, I don't think I can actually go back. In my opinion, this is simply a better control scheme for Storm that just had a terrible name for it. Yeah, you can enable all sorts of assists if you just want to mash circle and have the game on autoplay, but if you turn all of that stuff off, I would say this is more of a modern take on Storm controls. They could have totally done it like Sparking Zero did and called this standard, while the other ones would be called classic. The one disadvantage you have for simple controls is how you charge chakra. You have to sit idly for half a second, so you can actually charge faster on classic, but it's so close to being equal, and to me, this control scheme just makes a lot more sense in my head. But Naruto Storm games are not just about the online experience, even though that's what a lot of players focus on. They are very much known for their single-player campaigns, and for a very long time, I was single-player only on the Storm series. Part of the reason why Shinobi Striker had a mixed reception was because it focused mainly on online play, which left a lot of Storm fans annoyed by how lacking the single-player content was. And here in the Ranking of Naruto games, we like to take all aspects into consideration. Storm games are known for some of the best story modes in anime game history, so how did Connections cater to that player base? They didn't. They fumbled. So bad. Connections has 2 single-player modes, and I kind of like one of them, but the other one is probably the worst the series has ever seen, and that is saying a lot. History mode is absolutely worthless. It's a very abridged retelling of the entire Naruto story, full of nothing but recycled encounters from the previous games. They straight up reused previous fights, quick time events, cutscenes, and it is all upscaled, but all reused anyway. In between these fights, we have every gamer's favorite, slideshows. And they didn't even bring over some of the more unique events in previous games, some of the more unique boss fights, or the free roaming, or the horde battles from the previous Storm games that fans actually loved. So you're basically playing recycled content from previous games, but not even the best stuff. So that whole game mode is a huge bummer. Can you believe they actually tried to sell us this game mode as if it had all the previous games combined? And they call my videos clickbait. On the other hand, the special story is quite good in my opinion. Now this tells an original story with Boruto as the protagonist. There are some narrative hooks here that are quite common to Naruto filler, a little bit overused in my opinion, like there's a mystery Uchiha causing trouble, because we never saw that before. And making new villains is expensive, so let's just make Naruto evil, and the main villain just wants to do what Pain did, even says it himself, he's very pain-pilled like that. But outside of those usual tropes, I found the story to be very well written. It has some cool plot twists, and it does have some unique boss fights and encounters that make it enjoyable to play through, except for that one chapter where they make you play through Naruto's memories, because they needed to pad out this story mode a bit more. There's no free roaming in this game mode, which is probably a feature that some Naruto fans will miss, but with how bad the free roaming was becoming with every Storm game, I honestly did not miss it at all. That said, this special story is hardly enough to justify buying a whole new Storm game. So even today, despite me praising the netcode and the patches and all of that, I still don't think this game is worth full price. It needed a better single player experience, and if history mode was good, then maybe yeah, but the special story on its own, it's not enough. I mean, would you pay full price for the Mecha Naruto story in Storm Revolution? Would you pay full price for the Boruto story in Storm 4 Road to Boruto? Because it's kind of that size. It's a good story, but short nonetheless. The game had a rough start, and a lot of its downsides are still present today, but a lot of them got fixed too, and I don't think the game gets enough credit for that, because well, a lot of people had already quit by the time those fixes came in. And I think this game is very easy to compare to something like Storm Generations, which was also pretty terrible in the single player department, but made great changes to the combat that would improve the series for the rest of the time. So as a package, I am actually gonna rank Connections above Generations. At least it has a good special story, and it has the best online the series has ever seen. And I hope this game serves as a cautionary tale, because I know that CyberConnect 2 did not want to release a game like this. I know some people at Bandai didn't either, but working with license holders is tough when they don't understand that these things have huge consequences. And the simple fact that they rushed this game to launch may have ruined the Storm name forever. And And that's the ranking of Naruto games, at least until more Naruto games come out. I hope you guys enjoyed this journey, and if you watched the video this far, leave a comment with a fox emoji. Let's find out who the real ones are. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.